Chapter 936. Kyle Rayner was born with an abundance of emotions. With Thea's help, she would teach him some tricks from time to time. She did not require him to be able to control the emotional energy freely. As long as he had a general impression of the 7 emotions, it would be convenient for him to fuse them later. However, this process was still very difficult. With each additional emotion, the difficulty of obtaining a new emotion would double. However, as an emotional artist, Kyle Rayner's potential was limitless. As long as he rested a little, he would be able to continue. Thea had left behind a projection to help him level up. This guy still needed a long time to master the 7 lights as one. He would not be able to make it in time for the Battle of the First Lantern. In fact, it would not be of much use even if he did. Her request for Kyle Rayner was to successfully fuse the 7 lantern beasts before the big event of Lights Out. Thea's main body spent more than a day before finally retrieving the correct coordinates from Guardian Holuba's memory. Her figure flickered and disappeared from the main planet. A huge sarcophagus floated in the depths of space. There were many seals densely packed on top of it, isolating time and space. It prevented energy from entering or exiting in any form. This place did not belong to any sector. Even the Green Lantern Corps, which had dominated the universe for countless years, did not mark this place. The Guardians had set up a super-large prison in the middle of the Sea of Stars. There were meteorites everywhere, and countless planetary fragments were wandering around. Even the most advanced detectors could not find this place. However, the sarcophagus had been opened, and 2 groups of people were facing each other. 4 Guardians who had escaped from the Black Death Emperor were discussing something in low voices. Although Gantherseed was still struggling, he was tightly bound by energy chains. 2 energy pipes passed through the 2 of them and connected to a colorful lantern not far away. A tall figure with a 7-colored glow could be faintly seen in the lantern. He was roaring at the Guardians. On the other side of the lantern stood 8 short men. They had blue skin and were a meter tall. All of them indicated that they were of the same race as the Guardians. However, their clothes were tattered like refugees. The leader of the group was an old man whose beard almost reached his feet. "Are you crazy? Wasn't sealing the first lantern a joint decision? His energy is too dangerous, it's an uncontrollable factor." The big-headed Guardian, who had spoken to Thea several times, was expressionless at this time. He glanced at First Lamp, who was still trapped in the lantern, and slowly said, "Everything is for the peace of the universe. Emotions are the source of the turmoil of the universe. Because of greed and anger of life, it triggers the courage to resist. All of this is a cycle. Only by breaking this cycle and eliminating the emotions of all life can the universe usher in true peace. As the First Lantern Guardians, your duties will end today. Come and join us." "Nonsense. You are insulting our sacrifice and perseverance for hundreds of millions of years. You made us guard this prison for hundreds of millions of years, and now you are saying that everything is wrong. You don't deserve to be a Guardian. You have lost your nature and power," the blue man with the long beard retorted loudly. "My brother, you're wrong. Could it be that you still haven't seen the truth? Life is equal. They have the right to decide where they go. The Guardians shouldn't interfere." Gantz, who was tied up like a dumpling, also spoke from the side. The 3 groups of people of the same race began to quarrel fiercely. In the eyes of the Guardians and the First Lantern Guardians, they were the high and mighty masters. Ordinary people could only accept it passively. They shouldn't and couldn't raise any objections. Gantz was much more open-minded. He suggested that the Guardians should completely give up their power and move behind the scenes. Such words were scolded by both sides, thinking that he had forgotten his duty. The 3 groups of people blamed each other. The young mistress hid in the dark and listened for a while. She felt that the Guardians had lived for so many years in vain. They had never recognized their position and forced their minds to fill in a bunch of responsibilities. The few of them argued over and over again. In fact, whether the universe was destroyed or not had nothing to do with them. You guys hid so well. After doing so many bad things, aren't you afraid of going to hell? Thea calmly walked out of the void. She first opened her eyes to look at First Lantern. The result was not bad. This guy was not strong. He was even weaker than Lady Styx. However, she also knew that he had lost his ring. Plus, he had been imprisoned for billions of years. Now, he was used as a battery to power the Third Army scattered all over the universe. It was already very good that he still had such strength after all that. We're doing this for the peace of the universe. This shouldn't go against the new god's mission, said the big-headed guardian whose name Thea didn't know. Purely from the perspective of death, that was indeed the case. The world of death didn't need emotions. Ridiculous. Theo looked up at the sky and laughed. Just when the guardians thought that she was going to say something brilliant, she suddenly did a space jump. Her right hand threw out a wind blade to cut off the energy chain connecting Gantz and First Lantern. At the same time, she set up a barrier in front of her. The four little blue men hurriedly attacked, but unfortunately, the barrier did not break at all. Seeing that they couldn't break the barrier in a hurry, the two guardians could only rely on their own energy to connect to First Lantern. Your Majesty Goddess, what you're doing is unwise. You don't understand the danger of prisoners. If you want Gantz, then they're yours. Please leave. After being ambushed, a normal person would have been furious. However, the little blue men had no emotions. They were still the same as before. They were like a mechanical program. I'm neither omnipotent nor omniscient. However, I know this guy. He's a transmigrator. He traveled from tens of thousands of years in the future to your era, 10 billion years ago. Am I right? Thea grabbed Gantz and calmed down a lot. She pointed at the colorful figure in the lantern and asked. The prisoner grinned and laughed silently. The four guardians' faces were blank. The prison guards didn't know what she was doing and chose to watch from the sidelines. Only Gantz nodded. Your Majesty Goddess, you're right. He brought us the technology to make lantern rings. We still don't fully understand that technology. Thea nodded slightly. She said to Gantz, I'm very sorry. Based on your tone, for the peace of the universe, I have to apologize. Gonsei was stunned. He didn't understand what she was talking about. Just as he asked, what? He saw Sia's jade-like fingers stabbing straight into his chest. Why are you trying to kill me? Before he could understand what was going on, he realized that the opponent wasn't attacking his body. She was attacking something of a higher level. Suddenly, he thought of something and began to resist with all his might. The four guardians, said, and the 8 prison guards also attacked together. Chapter 937. If she was still the goddess of soul, she might not have been able to withstand so many attacks. The Guardian's individual combat power was not inferior to Superman's. Now that the 13 little blue men were attacking together, their power was extraordinary. With so many people working together, even the wasteland wolves would be defeated. However, from her perspective, these attacks were not bad. She maintained the shield with one hand and searched Gantz's soul with the other. No. That's mine. Mine. First Lantern and the distant lantern was very aloof. He looked at them as if they were a group of ants, but Thea's sudden attack disrupted his plan. He began to struggle. Thea smiled because she found something in Gantz's soul. Although he resisted tenaciously, her level was really high. Ignoring Gantz's resistance and First Lantern's roar, she pulled out a dazzling 7-colored ring from the soul. This was the universe's first emotional ring. It was not a green or yellow light, nor did it belong to any single spectrum. It represented all the emotions in the universe. The ring did not belong to her, so it resisted with all its might. However, as a rootless duckweed, how could it resist the goddess of death? Thea cleared her mind and focused on pulling out the ring from Gant's soul. The ring was mixed with countless threads. Under the forceful pull, the threads pulled at the soul. Gant's face was full of pain. Bear with it, I'm very fast. What's wrong with you guys? Why did you hide this kind of ring so deep? She pulled as she complained. The soul would more or less be damaged, but this was not a problem for her. Ganla was not an ordinary person. At this level, the soul of a long-lived species was very strong. Most ordinary people would have fainted or been seriously injured, but old man Ganser was still able to yell and scream. As if realizing that she was determined to win, Ganla gave up resisting. Thea's movements were greatly accelerated. She had cut half of the hundreds of soul threads. Success was in sight. How dare you touch my things? You're just a primitive person. You don't deserve it. First Lantern was furious and finally revealed his trump card. With his order, the Third Army all over the universe stopped and turned towards First Lantern's direction. It was similar to the conversion process, but this time it was more thorough. Flesh, bones, and skin all turned into a ball of gelatinous substance. Then, an imperceptible light was born from it and flew into the distance. In an instant, the Third Army that covered the universe announced its end. All the assimilated people turned into lifeless mud. Morality, life, wisdom, everything related to the living was turned into a light. A light may be weak and imperceptible, but when this light spread across the universe, it was a spectacular scene. The Guardians used First Lantern's energy to function for the Third Legion, and First Lantern also used their Legion to help him escape. Both sides deceiving each other, and to say no one was more insidious than the other. Even though their souls were long gone, their flesh and blood still retained the emotions of the living. Some were passionate, some were greedy, and some were full of love. Their emotions were extremely weak, like fireflies in the night sky. When this number exceeded 1 billion, 10 billion, and 100 billion, even the gods could not ignore it. The Third Army carried the Guardians' dream of universal peace. They turned into beams of light and flew over from all corners of the universe, emitting colorful brilliance. It was like a sea of light rushing towards First Lantern. Quick, strengthen the prison. The Guardians did not expect First Lantern to have such a big move. They did not care about Thea and worked together to strengthen First Lantern's prison. The 8 First Lantern guards worked the hardest. The little blue man with a long beard clenched his teeth so hard that the veins on his forehead popped. He seemed to be using some kind of secret technique just to split a little more energy from his body to strengthen the prison. Unfortunately, their strengthening was like a drop in the bucket in front of the beams of light. They were long-lived species and could fight against 10,000, but in front of 100 billion, they were just mortals. It was not only the intelligent life that fought against them, but also First Lantern, who had been plotting for a long time. Ha! You primitive people tremble in front of me. In First Lantern's crazy laughter, the prison was shattered. The long-bearded guard, who worked the hardest, fainted from the energy backlash. The last defense set up by the Guardians was like a thin layer of paper, and it was broken with a gentle push. And this only consumed a small amount of energy from the sea of light. The remaining energy began to gather in First Lantern's body, and his strength began to grow. Theo looked at him from the corner of her eyes. First Lantern had expanded from the size of a normal person to a few hundred meters tall. The nerves and blood vessels in his body were replaced by colorful emotional light, and his face was majestic and oppressive. If Hal Jordan and the others saw this guy, they might be shocked. The energy gathered by billions of intelligent life was not something that could be defeated by the Lantern Ring. No matter how united they were, it was useless. Not to mention 7 lanterns, even 70 lanterns would be useless. There was a qualitative difference between them. The probability of an ant defeating an elephant was almost negligible. Only a higher-level beast could defeat an elephant. But this guy was only a few hundred meters tall. He had no problem scaring the lanterns. Looking at the energy that was so dense that it was almost solid, it was as if the universe trembled when he moved his arms. First Lantern could defeat 1,000 or 10,000 lanterns with this energy. But in Thea's eyes, it was a little flashy. The energy was too superficial, and he was unable to restrain it, which resulted in his huge body. Darkseid was only 3 meters tall. That was the height of his race. Thea also maintained a height of 1.8 meters. It was not that they could not become a few hundred meters tall, but it was meaningless except for being laughed at by people of the same level. For someone like First Lantern, who had too much energy and could not restrain it, speed was definitely his shortcoming. Other than becoming a big target, he was not of much help in a battle of the same level. Is this the ring that you've traveled through billions of years to get your hands on? Thea suddenly exerted her strength. She did not care if it would cause damage to Gauntha and violently cut off all the soul connections. A ring that emitted countless colors of light appeared in the palm of his hand. She had noticed it when she first came into contact with it. This ring was also the origin, or rather, the ring was the new god. It represented emotion. Just like Mitron's chair of Mobius, whoever sat on the chair would be the god of knowledge. Rather than saying that Mitron was the god of knowledge, it was more accurate to say that the chair was the god of knowledge. This ring had the same effect. Whoever wore the ring would be the god of emotion. Emotion was not as good as death, but it was similar to good and evil. It was a necessary trait for intelligent life. If there were no emotions, then it wouldn't be considered a life. Now that Thea had reached the limit of the divine seat, she had to give up a divine seat to obtain a new one. Chapter 938. In Holuba's memory, she saw the entire process of the first ring's forging. First Lantern, as an ambitious young man, first came to the Guardians who were still young and inexperienced 10 billion years ago. With some sweet words, he taught them how to forge rings using the emotional spectrum. The first ring not only contained the emotions that the Guardians abandoned, but also First Lantern's ambition. This ring was the entirety of his conspiracy. Unfortunately, his image as a good young man was shattered too early. At that time, the Guardians were no longer in their prime, but they still worked together to seal First Lantern with the ring. After that, the ring was taken away and sealed in Gant's soul. Thea tried to feel it carefully. The ring was the origin, but the origin was not the ring. If she wore the ring, she would only be borrowing the power of emotions. This thing had nothing to do with her. It would be stupid to give up one's position just to borrow a part of the power. The result was a little disappointing. Emotions were a high-level origin, not as deep as death, but on the same level as justice and evil. If it did not conflict with her, she could absorb it with some effort. But this ring was different. It was too complicated. Not only did it contain the source that represented the deity position of emotions, but it also contained the emotions of the little blue men and the First Lantern. They used their own emotions as bait to capture this source. Billions of years had caused several substances to mix together. Just like the previous death, Sia had to spend a lot of effort to purify the impurities. To use this ring freely was more troublesome than death. She did not have much understanding of emotions. There were too many emotions in intelligent life, and it was not an exaggeration to say that there were 70 or even 700 emotions. In the end, she might waste her original path of death. She really did not want to try. Also, death had a poor tolerance. The previous trait of wealth had a first-come, first-served problem. They were the foundation for Thea to bear death, so they were barely compatible. This god of emotions was completely foreign. Death did not care about it at all. If Thea forcefully fused with it, who knew what would happen? Useless. She sighed. If this thing was in First Lantern's hands, it would definitely increase his power. But in her hands, it would at most be an unsuitable collectible. But the enemy would be much weaker, and she could get the drops in advance. No matter how she looked at it, it was a good thing. Then, under First Lamp's furious gaze, she kept the ring in her bag. Moreover, he revealed a radiant smile to Chu Dang. What kind of man are you if you can only stare at me? If you have the ability, come and hit me. First Lantern was so angry that his teeth were itching. His original plan was to wait until the Third Army had developed to its largest scale. Then, when the Guardians were at their most high-spirited, he would flip the table and enjoy their horrified gazes. Finally, he would use Black Tiger Steel's heart to obtain the ring that had been sealed in Gant's soul. This way, not only would he be able to slap the face of the enemy, but he would also be able to reach the peak of his life. Not only did he want to destroy his enemies physically, but he also wanted to destroy their minds and wills. This kind of counterattack was very suitable for him. He had been holding back for countless years to achieve this goal, and now he was about to succeed. In order to prevent any unexpected changes, he had imagined many scenarios, but he had always focused on the little blue men. He had never thought that a woman he had never met would jump out. If you want to flip the table, go ahead and flip it. Why did he ruin my plan? Not only did Thea flip his table, she also stole his job. If it were an ordinary person, he would have charged over and split Mount Hua in half, but First Lantern was no ordinary person. He glared at Thea fiercely. In this time and space, everyone in this world was primitive in his eyes. He had no intention of asking for her name. He opened his hands, and light flashed. Red, orange, yellow, green, blue, and purple mixed with many emotions flew out from his palms. The strands of emotion were like countless butterflies. They danced and used their insignificant strength to grab at the void. Thousands of strands of light gathered into a beam of light. Relying on this powerful energy, First Lantern tore a crack in the real world. He wanted to change the timeline and return himself to the point before Thea came. Even if he had to flip the table, he had to take back his job. A wise choice. Thea sighed. First Lantern did not come to snatch the ring from her. Instead, he went back to the source. This meant that he had not been blinded by the sudden increase in power. He could still make the best judgment for himself. Above all, war was war. Next, war was war. At this level, fighting was the same. Even with Darkseid's bad temper, he would try his best not to fight if he could. Going back to the timeline and not fighting with Thea, eliminating all the unfavorable factors before the Germinal organization, this was a very smart choice. However, he still underestimated Thea. This move was invincible against Sinisto and Hal, but it was nothing in front of Thea. You're unlucky to have met me. In this day and age, those who dared to set foot in the timeline more or less had something to rely on. If First Lantern dared to attack, Thea also had her own ways to counter. This was her timeline, and First Lantern came from thousands of years in the future. Thea naturally had the home field advantage. Furthermore, she had someone in the timeline. Speed and Ballistic received the order. Time was tight and the mission was important, so they did not have time to change their avatars. 2 streaks of blue light ran out. In the blink of an eye, they cut off the connection between First Lantern and the timeline. Converging into a beam of light was indeed terrifying, but its essence was still a beam of broken light. Individual emotions were extremely fragile. As long as one had patience, even an ordinary person could solve it. The two of them divided the work well. They ran like crazy. They cut the timeline while Thea closed the gap in the real world. Before First Lantern could understand what was going on, he was already forced out. First Lantern had never seen an extremely fast person before, but that did not stop him from attacking these 2 ants. The huge amount of energy gave him the ability to change reality, but the two extremely fast people were hiding outside of time, so he did not have a place to attack. As a combination of emotions, his speed was as slow as a turtle. Changing reality, twisting the timeline, and a few extraordinary powers could not be used. Facing an extremely fast person, he really did not have a good way to deal with them. The emotional impact was very strong, but if he could not hit the enemy, it would be a waste of effort. First Lantern tore the timeline again, but he was still blocked. Thea directly used legendary magic to test the waters. Hundreds of flaming meteorites were pulled out from the void. This was not her first time fighting in space. Meteorite magic was extremely powerful on the ground, but there was no gravity in space, so its power was instantly reduced by half. However, First Lantern was a few hundred meters tall, flashing with a rainbow light. He was so ostentatious in front of the goddess of death. Thea felt that if she did not smash his head, she would be letting down his big body. As for the lack of gravity in space, that was also a small problem. Thea imitated First Lantern's mental power and made a beacon. Then, all the meteorites seemed to be pulled by some kind of force and crashed straight into First Lantern. Chapter 939. Facing the overwhelming meteor shower, First Lamp was not afraid at all. There was even a look of disdain in his eyes. He waved his left hand, and the violent fire elements were appeased. The heavy earth elements were disintegrated, and the sharp wind elements also stopped howling. Everything has emotions, and these things of yours are no exception. As a scientist, First Lamp did not know what magic was, but he knew how energy was formed and could control the emotions of elements. Magic was no secret to him. When the fire elements were no longer violent, the earth elements lost their weight, and the wind elements lost their speed. This legendary spell naturally could not continue. Thea could not help but sigh. Magic could be said to be successful at the level of mortals, but at the higher levels, it was not very effective. In terms of life essence, this First Lamp was not a god. At most, he was an amalgamation of emotional energy. However, his energy was huge. In terms of magnitude, it was already beyond her or dark side. It was even comparable to the spirit. It was just that he did not know how to use it. This energy was enough, but it did not belong to him at all. As time went by, First Lamp's energy started to show signs of decline. Emotions were not normal. Ordinary people could not always live passionately. It was normal to be indifferent. This showed the value of lanterns. Otherwise, if everyone on the street had courage and willpower, why didn't the green light choose them? Because ordinary people lacked endurance when it came to emotions. After absorbing the emotions of billions of intelligent beings, First Lamp's energy was fluctuating. The general trend was going downhill. As a mortal, he could control so much energy. Without the help of the ring, First Lamp could only do some simple and crude work. Like tearing the timeline, there was no technique to speak of. His method of breaking magic was not very brilliant. He was just taking drastic measures. There were too many intelligent beings in the universe. There might be life forms like the fire and water elements that were later assimilated by the Third Army and turned into the source of First Lamp's emotions. After all, elements were not inanimate objects. It was not too ridiculous to say that they had emotions. First Lamp took Thea's attack effortlessly. This made him even more confident of his strength. He even smiled mockingly at Thea, as if to say, "You are not that great. How dare you look down on my magic? Here's a small gift for you." Thea said it was a small gift, but it wasn't small at all. With the godhood of death, her attainments in magic had long surpassed those of her predecessors, perhaps even far surpassing them. She might still be lacking in details, but her horizons were different. Even if all the great wizards from ancient times were gathered together, they would not be able to see as far and as deep as her. If ordinary people's spells were divided according to the weave's level, they would be ranked from the first to the ninth circle. Spells above the ninth circle could be considered legendary spells, and the weave had almost no effect on such spells. It all depended on the caster's own conditions. All legendary mages could cast level 10 spells, and a small number of them could reach level 11. As for the few people who could leave their names in the history of magic with the highest combat power, they could cast spells up to the 12th circle. Legendary mages often looked down on the gods because some spells could not be cast by them. For example, Ares, Diana. They were too focused on their own power, and even casting time stop took a lot of effort. As for a mage-type deity like Sia, it was easy for her to reach the 11th or 12th circle. Relying on her high realm and solid foundation, she was going to mobilize the divine power of death and the magic power of the universe to cast an unprecedented 13-circle spell. Even though she had made some preparations beforehand, this spell still took some time. Meteorite was an excellent camouflage. While First Lamp was proudly showing off, it bought her 5 seconds. Her hands moved quickly, and countless mysterious runes were quickly drawn. A huge number of magic circles were connected to each other, piling up layer upon layer. The total amount of magic power Thea poured into them was at least equivalent to 10 great wizards of Merlin's level. A grandfather clock hundreds of meters tall was created. The grandfather clock was not affected by the environment, as if it had been suspended in this universe since ancient times. It was thick and heavy, as if it had experienced countless years. The body of the clock was dark black, and the sun, moon, and stars were carved in relief. The dial was golden yellow, which was made from the fragments of time shattered by the anti-watchers. The needle was illusory, sometimes visible, sometimes invisible. It was filled with Thea's understanding of time. The crisp sound of the bell reverberated throughout the entire universe. All intelligent life felt a sense of helplessness fill their hearts. It was as if they had encountered their natural enemy. They were helpless, and in the face of the end of everything, some cried, some laughed. With just a crisp sound, the universe quieted down. This was the sound of the bell of fate. The main body of the grandfather clock was still in the hands of Big Brother Fate. Thea went to the Endless Clan from time to time, and naturally saw this thing. Big Brother Fate did not care. Look at it if you want to, I have no objections even if you want to smash it. Thea was not so daring as to smash the entire Bell of Fate, but that did not stop her from simulating a part of its functions. Even with the support of a huge amount of magic, she had seen it with her own eyes, and after putting in a lot of effort, she could only simulate 1/10 of its functions. The body of the grandfather clock was created with magic, but she borrowed the divine power of death to draw the projection of Big Brother Fate's clock over. First Lantern looked at it for a long time, but could not figure out the use of summoning a large clock. In his era, such primitive mechanical creations could only be found in fossils. He snorted, boring trick. Although he said it was boring, he was actually very afraid. As the embodiment of the emotions of all living beings, he had super high resistance to all kinds of abnormal conditions. However, his resistance to the source of damage like fate was very weak. It could even be said that it was thousands of times more powerful. First Lantern of the original spacetime was instantly destroyed by Black Death Emperor. The problem was that his embodiment only had strength, but no realm to support it. The grandfather clock seemed to be mocking him. The golden dial shone, showing his childhood in a trance, the scene of him being imprisoned by the protectors. It also showed that he would meet his death today. How could it be? You must be kidding me. First Lantern did not hesitate. His body rose again. No matter what this broken clock was, he was confident that he could shatter it. He had traveled through countless years to this point in time. He wanted to be a god and enjoy the worship of all living beings. He did not want to be a stepping stone for primitive people. Anger, greed, fear, courage, hope, pity, love. The 7-lantern core could not represent all emotions. There were many more, such as hatred, pain, numbness, regret, excitement, and joy. These were the source of his strength. Chapter 940. Countless positive and negative emotions merged together. Without the ring as a foundation, First Lamp was controlling the emotions of all beings as immortal. He felt like his head was about to explode, and he was extremely frustrated. It's all because of this clock. He ignored Thea, and colorful lights began to shine. Space seemed to be torn apart. First Lamp used all his strength and punched the clock. This punch was not physical strength, but emotional strength. It contained his own greed, the fear, hope, courage, and other emotions that the little blue men had abandoned, and more of the emotions that the Third Army had captured from all the intelligent beings in the universe. Dong! The grandfather clock rang for the second time after it was summoned. The young mistress had already run back to the underworld before he was about to ring the clock. The little blue men did not know how powerful it was, and were watching the show from afar. The sound of the clock whistled past. There was no earth-shattering aura, nor was there a magnificent scene. Other than the long-bearded guard who had already fainted, the other 13 little blue men all spat out blood. Ced was afraid that Gonla would be hurt, so he put up a shield in front of him, but how could fate resist? Ced's shield did not work at all. The sound of the clock was like a breeze, gently brushing past their hearts. The next moment, it felt like they were carrying a huge mountain on their backs. The sound of the clock caused their spiritual strength to fluctuate, rising and falling. It was the first time these immortals had seen such a strange attack. Even with billions of years of knowledge, they did not have any effect. They all fainted without a sound. Thea ran away, and the guard fainted. First Lamp, who bore the brunt of the attack, was the unluckiest. Others only fainted due to mental trauma, but because he was an amalgamation, he was hit 1,000 times harder than normal. 1/5 of the emotional energy that made up his body was instantly scattered, and his huge body shrunk. First Lamp tried his best to restrain the uncontrollable spiritual strength, and barely recovered his consciousness. But the energy that was scattered could never be recovered. Their fate was over. There were very few existences who could resist fate, but First Lamp was not one of them. Even though he had a huge amount of energy, he was still a scheming mortal who had transmigrated from thousands of years in the future. The Bell of Fate felt that it had been provoked. This was the first time it had seen someone throw a punch at it. Following its instincts, it began to fight back. The needle on the golden dial started to spin. It was not spinning very fast, but First Lamp felt that his time was starting to blend into this timeline. No! You can't do this. I don't belong here. Previously, he had tried his best to tear apart time. Now, it was finally his turn to taste the consequences. You were chatting quite happily just now. Don't you like the timing? Then you can stay here. Time did not like to be toyed with, nor did it like to be offended. Those who tried to control time would have to pay the price in the end. For First Lamp, he had not yet been born at this point in time. If he was solidified, what awaited him was obliteration. He began to resist with all his might. Previously, he had tried all sorts of ways to squeeze into the timeline. Now that the timeline was forcefully pulling him in, he began to push back. This was the wonders of fate. The golden dial seemed to have infinite power, firmly grabbing the first light and pulling it into the timeline. The other party naturally resisted with all his might, but at this moment, Thea quietly ran back. He was overjoyed when he saw this. The Bell of Fate was much stronger than she had imagined. If First Lamp did not have more tricks up his sleeve, he would be dead for sure. The Black Death Emperor could cut off all his emotional connections and then kill him with a single scythe. Thea and the Black Death Emperor walked different paths and could not be copied. But she had her own way. Looking at the temporarily trapped First Lamp, she laughed heartily. She took out the blood-soaked night sky sword and stabbed at First Lamp's head. The murderous aura on the sword was almost tangible. Xia didn't need to pose or make any feints to deal with it. First Light was now like a target. Although its body had shrunk by 1/5, its head was still more than 10 meters tall. It could be stabbed with its eyes closed. This sword was like thunder, crossing the distance of space and carrying with it the power of death. No matter how many emotions you had, or how many intelligent beings you had, her target was the source. As long as the main body was killed, all the other emotions would disappear instantly. If he took this sword head-on, he would definitely die. After all, the Black Death Emperor's scythe was remade. The recipe was different, but the taste was still the same. First Lamp understood that he had to dodge this sword. He burst out all his potential and gathered a sea of emotions in his body. Countless positive and negative emotions were no longer mediated. Instead, they were allowed to oppose each other and then exploded. There was no sound, no fire, but relying on the violent explosion, First Lamp not only escaped the pull of the Bell of Fate, but also left Thea's attack range. As the price, his body exploded from the middle into two halves. Countless emotional energy turned into nothingness and returned to the world, but more of it was sucked in by the Bell of Fate along with the other half of his body. No! First Lamp was like a resentful woman, futilely shouting at the Bell of Fate. Everything was a foregone conclusion. Although he was not fixed in this timeline, he was missing a part of himself. Although this timeline would not erase him, he was a complete anomaly. It was the same for his original timeline. It was neither there nor here. Both of his feet stepped on a different timeline. A large amount of information began to rush into his brain. His originally clear memories began to blur. He felt that he was a scientist hundreds of millions of years in the future, and then he felt that he was a lucky person who picked up a ring in this time and space. First Lamp had never heard of Zhuang Zhou Meng Dai, but the meaning was still the same. The future, the present, the two memories entangled with each other. There was the people in the future cheering for him, and there was the imprisonment in this time and space for hundreds of millions of years. Which one was the real him? The young lady saw that he was in a daze. Without thinking, she raised her hand and summoned her divine power for another sword strike. Under the influence of the strong external force, First Lamp temporarily gave up on philosophical questions. The part that he had lost was considered lost. Now that his body was still there, his energy body operated and returned to human form. However, his body was reduced by half again. He was now only 80 meters tall. Facing Thea's fatal attack, he made a prompt decision. If he could not beat her, he had to run. He looked at the Bell of Fate with hatred. This giant bell was still standing there, as if it was saying, "Little guy, come and hit me again if you dare." First Lamp could only shout that he could not afford to provoke her. He had a faint feeling that if he was given some time, he could still find the missing part. Fate was fair to everyone. In fate, there were fixed numbers and variables. The missing part was fixed, but it was not unchangeable. Unfortunately, he lacked time now. Chapter 941. With half of her body missing, Thea had surpassed First Lamp in every aspect, be it energy, realm, usage, or understanding of the rules. Her light sword had already enveloped a radius of tens of thousands of meters. First Lamp couldn't help but rejoice. There were benefits to his smaller body. It was much easier to move through space than before. With a whoosh, he broke through space and fled, trying to get rid of the fiend behind him. "Don't run. Stop right there." First Lantern ran in front like a thief, while Xia chased after him with her sword raised like the owner of the lost item. "I should have brought a helper," Thea thought embarrassedly. Her top fighters like Fiora, Mingi, and Guangdong could delay First Lamp for a few moves, and she could kill him in one strike. In the original spacetime, First Lamp had nothing to do, so he went to tease Sinisto and destroyed Kruger. In the end, he was furious to the extreme. Sinisto and the Parallax monster combined to stall First Lamp, creating an opportunity for the Black Death Emperor. Now, Kruger was fine, while Sinisto was still waiting to be resurrected in the underworld. Without anyone to help, First Lamp ran away like a rabbit. Thea could only chase after him with her sword. A sure kill attack needed to be prepared, and she couldn't kill him with a casual strike. As long as she accumulated divine power, her speed would be affected, and her opponent would have a chance to run away. If she didn't accumulate divine power, it would be useless to chase after him. Thea regretted not bringing a few helpers. She didn't know that First Lamp didn't feel good either. He had endured for so many years, and just as he escaped, his dream of returning to the original spacetime with great power collapsed. He couldn't go back to show off. What was he trying to do for so many years? The more he thought about it, the angrier he got. However, he didn't dare to go back and fight with Thea for 300 rounds. He could only vent his anger on the planets by the roadside. He grabbed a planet about the size of the moon, ignored the cries of the intelligent life on it, ran to the side of the planet, and threw it at Thea. Damn! Thea was shocked. When Batman and the clown were chasing each other on the road, the clown would at most throw a bomb or rocket behind him. This person in front of her, on the other hand, threw a planet. The planet wasn't big, and there weren't many intelligent life forms. But she couldn't ignore it. Even if she wasn't a hero of justice, she couldn't turn a blind eye to it. Thea raised her middle finger from afar. Ignoring the enemy, she quickly pushed the planet back into its original orbit. It was not enough to simply put it back into its original orbit. Rotation and revolution had to be considered. If the force was too strong or too weak, the planet would fly out of the protoplanetary system in 2 days or collide with a fixed star. She would have to bear the responsibility for the disaster that would result. Destruction was far more difficult than construction. The young mistress had to think about a lot of problems every second, such as the rotation speed of the planet, the strength of the gravity, and even the changes in the magnetic field, the alternation of day and night, and so on. A single mistake would cause the planet's environment to change. Actually, it didn't matter to the planet, but to the intelligent life forms, even the slightest change would be a world-ending disaster. She was afraid that she had made a mistake in her calculations, so she called for extreme speed to go to 10 years later to take a look. When she found that everything was normal, she continued her mad chase. If she had wasted any more time, First Lantern would have disappeared. However, before she could catch up, the other party threw another planet at her. Should she save them? He had to be saved. There were more people on this planet. After correcting 3 planets in a row, the young mistress couldn't take it anymore. This was simply endless. She could only activate the great summoning spell. She called for help. Diana, who had the mother box, was summoned over immediately. How could a green fitness exercise like pushing planets not involve Superman? Not only Superman, but Thea also dragged Supergirl, who was an otaku at home, out. After a simple conversation with the 3, Thea asked Diana to wear the purple lamp so that she could sense her position at any time. She left the 3 dumbfounded to correct the planets while she traversed space to chase after First Lantern. The 3 initially thought that this was just physical work, but they didn't expect to find that this was definitely mental work as soon as they pushed the planet into its orbit. Supergirl was a bad student. Even though calculus belonged to elementary school knowledge on Krypton, she was still a bad student. Bro Superman also didn't like to study. He clearly had a super mind, but he didn't become a scientist after graduation. Instead, he became a reporter. Diana was the best student of the 3, but she also liked swords, food, and fancy clothes more than science. It was really difficult for her to calculate the planet's orbit. The 3 looked at each other and didn't have any good ideas. They weren't Thea. Although the young mistress was a little lazy, her title was still a doctor. If the three of them didn't want to see intelligent life die in vain, they could only continue to ask for help. Diana found Qing Nu, the secretary who had a super long-distance connection to Earth, and quickly explained the situation. The secretary directly found the remaining members of the main alliance and asked them to help calculate the planet's orbit. Batman was worthy of being called an all-rounder. He was able to use the existing technology on Earth to send the Watchtower space base into orbit. He was very knowledgeable in astronomy, and Mr. Excellent wasn't far behind. With the help of the Flash and the AI, the results were sent to the three of them. They had just solved this problem when Thea started to call for help again. They could only follow up. First Lamp saw that Thea was worried and was overjoyed. The number of lives in the universe had nothing to do with him. Seeing that Thea was hesitant, he was even more motivated. Pushing the planet was too troublesome. After all, he had lost more than half of his energy. He couldn't move a large planet at all. However, this person was indeed sinister. He had started to tamper with the planet's interior. Thea could only do the preliminary work and left the rest to the three of them. The three of them sent the analysis results to the think tanks on Earth and asked them to help think of a solution. The planet has been deflected 180 degrees. The north and south magnetic poles have reversed. What do we do? Waiting online, urgent. The star has shifted. The entire galaxy has changed. What do we do? Waiting online, urgent. Half of the planet has been pulled into the black hole. What do we do? Waiting online, urgent. A bunch of messy problems were sent back to Earth. Batman was sweating profusely. No matter how smart he was, he couldn't handle it. His brain was also made of flesh, not a supercomputer. He had never thought about many things that were too obscure. He could only call for help. Those with doctorates in the main alliance were called over. Firestorm, the fat old man, the Atom Man, the Frost Killer, Barbara, a doctorate in archives management, and Cisco Ramon, a civilian scientist who didn't have a doctorate. A bunch of people were called over to help. With the team's efforts, they finally resolved all kinds of disasters. If this was a game, then everyone's astronomy knowledge would definitely be increased by a level. Chapter 942. Thea didn't know that a bunch of people on Earth were so busy that they were vomiting blood. In order to catch up with First Lamp, the 7 Lantern Corps, including the Red Lantern and the Orange Lantern Corps, were all called over to stop the enemy. Laughless was also unwillingly pulled out by threats and promises. In her opinion, the Orange Lantern was the only one who could exchange a few blows with First Lamp, even though this guy's IQ was too low. She didn't need the Lantern Corps' soldiers to deal much damage to First Lamp, as long as they could report their whereabouts and be able to stop him at the critical moment. Stop. At the critical moment, the Green Lantern Guy Gardner made a contribution. His position was not far from First Lamp. His courage was second only to Hal Jordan. The word fear did not exist in Guy Gardner's dictionary. He was the kind of person who dared to kick God. He raised his ring and a green sledgehammer appeared. He swung his arm, and with a crisp bam, he smashed First Lamp, who had already taken a step forward, out of the crack in space. The effect of power was mutual. Emotions followed the same principle. Using a single emotion to hit a collective of 50 billion emotions was like using one's head to smash a rock. Guy Gardner only saw stars and had a splitting headache. He endured and swallowed a mouthful of blood. However, he achieved his goal of stopping the enemy. Thea finally appeared in front of First Lamp again. Your end is here. Thea held the sword with both hands and mobilized all her divine power of death. The sword went straight for First Lamp's heart. She wanted to end it with one blow. Still unable to believe that he would fall in this barbaric era, First Lamp didn't even know Thea's name. Facing a sure kill attack, he mobilized all his emotional power and tried to communicate with the surrounding environment. He couldn't change the cause. He wanted to change the result. The empty space instantly changed. The stars disappeared, and Guy Gardner, who was not far away, became a passerby. Everything seemed to have returned to Earth. The battlefield became the White House and a small Belgian village. He tried to find the crack in Xia's heart and create his own escape route. After chasing for half a day, he finally had some understanding of the divine power of death. He didn't know what it was called, but it was very pure. As long as he destroyed this purity, there was a way out. He could even fight back. Thea snorted. If this little trick could bewitch her, the grass on her grave would be 3 feet tall. At the same time, he despised First Lamp. Even when death was at hand, he still did not have the courage to fight. It was no wonder that the little blue man had imprisoned him for 10 billion years. He lacked the magnanimity that a powerhouse should have, and his personality was too poor. Die. There were no impassioned words, nor were there any heroic words. The black longsword in his hand crossed the distance and stabbed into First Lamp's chest. Spare me, I don't know you. First Lamp was still trying to resolve her hostility with words. Unfortunately, the divine power of death passed through the layers of energy and found his true body. Thea's gaze also followed the godly power. She saw that in the deepest part of First Lamp's enormous body, an ordinary-looking young man with slightly curly hair was pleading with her with a face full of fear. This ambitious schemer who had transmigrated from billions of years in the future had never told the guardian his real name. His eyes were filled with disbelief as her sword pierced through his heart. There was still a trace of doubt on the young man's face. Was he going to die just like that? Was the earth-shattering energy of no use at all? Altering the timeline and distorting reality. This guy was practically the synonym of invincibility in Thea's eyes back then. Now, she had killed him as easily as a chicken. Thea could not describe how she felt. She only knew that she had to continue working hard. In order to prevent others from killing her like this, she had to walk to a higher place. She let out a long breath. Seeing First Lamp fall to the ground like a mountain, her heart was filled with endless emotions. No, what do I have to do with him? What's there to be emotional about? Her emotions were unreasonable. Thea could not be said to have a heart of stone, but she was experienced. Would she even feel emotional about the death of a nobody? Then let's not do anything serious. Her eyes flashed green. The eye of obliteration was drawn but not released. The scene in front of her shattered like glass. She was still in space. Guy Gardner, who was not far away, seemed to want to come over and help. Only 1 second had passed in her time, and First Lantern did not fall at all. Instead, he looked at her in horror. My sword should have hit you. The god of death does not lie. How are you still alive? Missy was puzzled. She looked at First Lamp from head to toe. She did not expect him to answer her question. After thinking for a while, she said, You use some kind of delaying method, right? You pushed the fatal attack to 200 years later. Ha, that's a good technique. Come and take my sword again if you can. Using energy to delay the fatal attack and using emotions to influence Thea unknowingly. First Lamp did have some tricks up his sleeve. Unfortunately, he was not strong enough. No matter how beautiful these tricks were, they were useless. You're pissing me off. First Lamp was forced into a dead end. He could only reveal his last card. A 5-colored giant that looked exactly like him walked out of his body. The two looked at each other with a paralyzed expression. However, the one that came later was more serious and wooden. There was no spirit in his eyes, like a puppet. This time, Milady was completely surprised. This guy had a lot of tricks up his sleeve. He had delayed the fatal attack and used emotions to confuse Xia. Then, according to the Flash, he had created a time remnant without anyone noticing, creating a self that was parallel to his own timeline. First Lamp was very clever at using emotions. This was not surprising. After all, this was his original plan. However, Thea did not expect him to be so involved in time. Unlike the time remnant created by the extreme speed, First Lamp used his own energy to create one. When he used his ultimate move, Thea was not idle either. She first sealed the space around them to prevent him from escaping. First Lamp's move was useless other than scaring people. He had been imprisoned for billions of years and had zero combat experience. He was a little too confident, thinking that two of him could defeat the enemy. However, that was not the case at all. Could two wasteland wolves defeat Darkseid? Could two Guangdong beat Thea? The higher the level of a battle, the less effective it would be to have more people. However, she did not underestimate her opponent. Her long sword raised a pale gray hurricane, blocking the wooden First Lamp's attack. At the same time, she targeted the original body and attacked. The divine power of death made her the fastest in the world. However, speed was clearly her opponent's weakness. The ink-black night sky sword kept causing wounds on First Lamp's body. Compared to his huge body, the wounds were very small. First Lamp was like a body of pure energy. He did not have blood. What flowed out was a type of energy. After several attacks, he could not hit Thea. Not only did the two First Lamps not help, but they were also a mess. Chapter 943. Guy Gardner was ready to help. In order to protect his pride, Thea could only let him be in charge of holding back. However, after 3 moves, he had to retreat helplessly. He couldn't fight and had been dodging the skills. This was not a game, there was no rule that teammates could not be hurt. Whether it was Thea or First Lantern, the attack range was very wide. If he didn't want to go to the underworld to find his old friend Hal Jordan, he had to dodge back and forth at full speed. Instead of risking a few hits, it was better to watch from the side. As Guy Gardner retreated to the side to help, Thea's attacks became fiercer. Although she couldn't play a fatal blow, the divine power of death still had its own uniqueness. Thea went at full speed, slashing at First Lantern, who was as big as a mountain. His opponent's speed was far slower than his, and his body was big, so it was not convenient for him to turn around. The battlefield of the two gradually descended from space to a planet. Thea saw that there were many intelligent beings here, so she naturally thought of their plan. They still wanted to play the same old game. Guy, you go to the battlefield. Carol, Laughlies, you came at the right time. Go help. She just asked Green Lantern to save people. Whether or not he could save them, this gesture had to be made. As soon as she finished speaking, Purple Lantern Carol Ferris and Orange Lantern also arrived. Thea was overjoyed. Why don't you all go together? The battlefield was tens of thousands of kilometers long. She tried to use less large-scale magic. To the intelligent life forms on this planet, it was as if they were sitting at home when disaster came from the sky. They could only see a 5-colored brilliance in the sky for one moment, and then a black curtain that engulfed the world in the next. Praying, hugging and crying together, they couldn't do anything in the face of disaster. I'll ask Santa Claus to send you a gift later. Go help. Thea kicked away Laughlies, who didn't want to move. Orange Lantern happily joined in the rescue. This guy waved his hand and summoned an army. His efficiency was unusually high. You can't kill me with this attack. We have no grievances, so why do you keep chasing me? First Lantern was very passive. He couldn't fight, and he couldn't run. Thea's sword could destroy tens of thousands of his feelings, but what was the use? He still had 50 billion emotions, so the tens or hundreds of thousands that were cut off were nothing. Of course it's useful. Your vision is too narrow and you're neglecting yourself. Thea let out a long sigh. It was actually quite tiring to keep moving at high speed. Being called narrow-minded by a primitive woman, First Lantern was not happy. He moved quickly and took a step forward, ready to launch a surprise attack while Thea was talking. However, he found his own problem, a big problem. His originally colorful body now seemed to be shrouded in a thin layer of gauze. It was gray but very fine. Today is your doomsday. Everything is over. First Lamp's body was a little stiff. The effect of this state was actually not long. It was an application of the dead mixed soul. The two positions were very compatible, but Thea did not understand it well enough. She lacked tens of thousands of years to settle down. The combination of the two was very shallow, but it was enough to deal with First Lamp. There was no time to delay. Thea once again saw the young man with great ambition but little talent in his body. He was pierced by the black sword for the second time. After fighting for half a day, First Lantern could only buy himself a few more minutes of life. It was meaningless. Leaving his main body twitching on the ground, she pointed her sword at Remnant Time. This time, it was even simpler. In less than a minute, he was killed. Remnant Time turned into dust. He did not belong here. He was squeezed out of the timeline the moment he lost his life. Thea flew to First Lantern's side and looked down at this opponent. His huge body started to wither, from his fingers to his arms to his neck. The emotional energy lost its support and dissipated in space like a candle in the wind. The expression on First Lantern's face could be described as strange. I will return again. Even if my life form has changed, perhaps I am no longer myself, there will be a time when I return. That is the night before dawn. This is the scene that fate has shown me. First Lantern's face was already shrouded in the black air of death. He raised his arm, only to find that his fingers had already turned into dust. When all the emotional energy left, his life would come to an end. This was the power of time. He was still immortal. Relying on emotions as support, he had already lived for 10 billion years. His human body had long reached its end. Emotions have abandoned me. Next time, I will return as an enemy of emotions. First Lantern cracked open his mouth and made an extremely arrogant declaration. Then, he turned into a pile of gravel in his laughter. What's with the arrogance? Is this guy dead? Guy Gardner rubbed his head. Seeing that their battle had ended, he slowly flew over. Carol and Laughless were also looking forward to the answer. Theo looked at them with a strange expression. He should be considered dead. She had some guesses about the specifics, but could not tell them in detail. First Lantern actually made a vow like a great ambition before he died. Although he was immortal, he had enough energy. As the saying went, the unity of all people, gathering all emotions, could indeed make the impossible possible. This was a variable in fate. He wanted to return on the eve of dawn and destroy all emotions. Fate neither agreed nor disagreed with his bold words. It was extremely neutral. Was it a lights-out event? Thea thought to herself. It did not look like it. Lights out was actually a form of protection for the universe. It prevented the emotional spectrum from drying up and causing the Big Bang. From the perspective of the universe and the gods, it was a good thing. This guy's last few words were full of resentment. No matter how she thought about it, it did not seem like he was here to do good. Could it be the Lantern of Daybreak? An enemy of emotions, full of hatred. This was the only thing that fit the criteria. Would this guy be reborn in the dark multiverse? Carefully sensing, she did not find First Lantern's soul after his death. Thea bade farewell to Guy Gardner and the others and returned to the underworld. She searched twice but did not find First Lantern's soul. Without a doubt, this guy was not dead. Whether he became the grandpa in the ring or was directly reborn in the dark multiverse was unknown. However, she would deal with whatever came her way. She was not afraid now, let alone in the future. Just as she was about to return to Earth, the two-faced man ran over and stopped her. Faced with Thea's behavior of leaving everything to others, the ambitious two-faced man was actually very happy. With power in his hands, everyone, regardless of whether they knew him or not, came before him to await his judgment. This place was 10,000 times better than Gotham. He was so happy that he did not want to go home. Not to mention having to queue up to give him dirty money, he would not even do a free resurrection. He was tired of living. Seeing countless people come before him every day like lambs waiting for his judgment, that kind of comfort could not be experienced in Gotham. Chapter 944. Your Majesty, don't go yet. To be honest, when he first found out that the superhero Thea was his boss, the two-faced man was worried for a long time. He could accept Wei Guangjing's actions before he was disfigured, but now he could not. He never thought that when he started working, he would realize, this was not the kind of environment that he had imagined. It all depended on what kind of people his colleagues were. Demons, death knights, evil gods, assassins, banshees. Compared to these people, the two-faced man was a rare good citizen. At most, he sold detergent in Gotham and collected protection fees. He had to be on tenterhooks every day to prevent Batman from suddenly jumping out of a corner. In terms of evil, he was not on the same level as his new colleagues. After working in the underworld for a while, he finally realized that this female superhero's view of good and evil was frighteningly weak. The new boss was definitely on the neutral side. It was just that he usually pretended to be kind and righteous. What's the matter? Thea frowned as she looked at the two-faced man. This guy knew his position very well. He was a good candidate to be the Secretary General. He was a gang leader in Gotham. At that time, he had combed his hair back and had an extraordinary aura. When he arrived in the underworld, he instantly changed to a 30-70 split. He did not bow and scrape like the lonely old man Sharon. However, his submissive attitude was very upright. At the same time, it did not make people look down on him. There are a few people who I don't know how to be punished. They have contributed a lot, but they have also made a lot of mistakes. Thea made a sound of surprise. She was a little curious that even the workaholic two-faced man could not make a judgment. To be honest, the underworld's punishment rules were very complicated. This was a side effect of the creation rules. All kinds of laws were not set by her, and it was not convenient for her to change them. And there were a lot of them. Books filled the entire library. They were densely packed with all kinds of rules. At first, the Missy pushed the door open out of curiosity. After that, she left in defeat. Anyway, she did not even take a look. Later on, she simply handed it over to the two-faced man, a law doctor, to study. Yes, that's right. This guy could become the Gotham District Attorney. He also had a doctorate title. She followed the two-faced man to the trial hall. When she saw a few people waiting for interrogation, the Missy was instantly happy. Little blue guardians. The four of them stood straight and looked straight, as if they were still on their own Eurasian main planet. However, they didn't have a body here, so they couldn't float in the air. Their short stature greatly reduced their imposing manner. Yo, the four of you, where did you come from? The eldest miss asked even though she already knew the answer. She smiled slyly. The four little blue men were much more well-behaved now. Their previous arrogance had all disappeared. The little blue man with the big head was the first to speak. Your Majesty Goddess, before he could finish, he was interrupted by Thea. Why are you always talking? Are they mute? Are you looking down on me, Helpless, they had no choice but to lower their heads under the eaves. One by one, they walked out and prepared to introduce themselves. Of course, Thea knew their names. They were all in Haruba's memories. She just wanted to take them down a notch. This was not Yura, this was hell. He waved his hand and said, I don't want to hear your names. Harvey, write them down. Write passerby 1, 2, 3, and 4 in the name column. That's it. She just needed to vent her anger by teasing the little blue man. There were still many things she needed to take care of in the outside world. She reached out to take the records of the underworld and began to read them one by one. Although the Guardians seemed to have done a lot of bad things, they had also done a lot of good things. In the 10 billion years before the rise of Earth's civilization, they had saved the universe countless times. If it were not for them, the universe would have exploded long ago. If the universe had exploded, Earth would not have survived. It could be said that they had done a lot of good things. They were more than qualified to be angels in heaven. However, they had also committed a lot of sins. Kalana had modified the settings of the mechanical hunter to kill all intelligent life in Sector 666. This could be blamed on Kalana. However, was this the only time the mechanical hunter had made a mistake? The records of the underworld said no. There had been more than one mistake. Was there no bloody massacre during the rise of the Green Lantern Corps? Were there no innocent sacrifices in the process? When the entire universe heard about the establishment of the Green Lantern Corps, they all rushed to spread the news. This was obviously impossible. Even Kerrigan and Lady Styx, who still occupied a few sectors, had a lot of say. They had used the tug-of-war to grind down many galactic overlords. Their status as the universe's police force had been earned through killing. Furthermore, the selection criteria for this Green Lantern Corps was completely up to Lantern Ring. One could be a Green Lantern just because one had courage. Was one necessarily a good person just because one had courage? In the end, the Third Corps had destroyed many planets. How many races had completely disappeared in the vast universe? It was impossible to calculate. The merits were not small, but the sins were also huge. This was the reason why the two-faced man could not make a judgment. All right, I'm a kind old man. I can't bear to see people suffer. Since we know each other, I won't punish you to hell. Didn't you brag about protecting the universe? I'll punish you to be reborn as ordinary people. You'll have to experience the difficulties of life. In the underworld, Thea had the highest authority. These words were equivalent to the final judgment. Neither the two-faced man nor Minos had the right to interfere. The two-faced man hurriedly wrote down the records according to the rules. Thea took the pen and quickly signed her name. This matter was considered effective. Off you go. The 4 little blue people were taken away by the staff to be reincarnated. She flipped to the last page and saw that these guys were killed by Adachitis. The few of them were knocked unconscious by the Bell of Destiny. Thea went to chase after the first lanterns. The unconscious guardians were tragically picked up by Adachitis, who passed by. When enemies met, their eyes turned red. The Red Lantern leader did not hesitate to tear them apart. That was a real tear. They were still unconscious and naturally could not resist. Inexplicably, they became ghosts. When they regained their consciousness, they were already in the underworld. It could be said that they were completely confused ghosts. Are there only these 4 guys? She asked the two-faced man, just the 4 of them. Thea nodded. It seemed that Gantherside's life was spared. It was most likely that some hero who passed by saved them. The 8 First Lantern Guardians also seemed to be alive. Everything was normal in the underworld. She hurried back to the universe. As expected, around the Bell of Destiny, a few groups of First Lanterns were arguing with each other. John Stewart and the new Green Lantern, Simon Bartz, led more than 10 Green Lanterns to protect the 8 First Lantern Guardians. The long-bearded little blue man was unconscious when the first lantern broke out of the prison. He was not affected by the bell of destiny. At this time, he had already woken up and was trying his best to save his companions. Opposite them was the Red Lantern Army. The muscular Daoist was originally dressed in red. Now, his head and face were covered in blood. His murderous aura was almost tangible. Beside his feet were the extremely broken corpses of the 4 guardians. There was no human shape at all. It showed how much hatred he had for the little blue men. Chapter 945. Between green and red was the Holy Walker. He led Blue and Skinny to save the guardians, Gauntlet, and said, "Daoist, the hatred should end here." Thea was very busy and didn't want to talk nonsense with them. She glanced at the red lanterns and said coldly. The goddess of death's eyes were emotionless. Even Red Lantern, who was dizzy with hatred, couldn't help but take a step back. Daoist turned and left without saying a word. Thea also sent Green and Blue away. She didn't care about the little blue men. She returned to this area first because she had to take back the Bell of Fate and return the projection she borrowed to Big Brother Fate. In fact, she wanted to borrow the book in Big Brother Fate's hand at first. Unfortunately, there was always a limit to the power of magic. The Book of Fate was a treasure above the rules. Magic couldn't simulate it at all. Anti-summoning was the first lesson of learning summoning. For many mages, it was a necessary skill. However, it was a little difficult to anti-summon a level 13 spell. It couldn't be like ordinary summoned creatures. With a soft bang, a green smoke rushed back to the original plane. Anti-summoning an object of this level required a very delicate spell and a lot of magic power. She didn't lack these qualities. After a lot of effort, she sent the bell back. As for the part of First Lantern's self that was cut off and the various emotions contained in it, she gave it to Big Brother Fate as a reward. That old guy liked to experience the wonders of different lives. Even if half of 100 billion lives were cut off, there were still 50 billion. It was enough for Big Brother Fate to ponder for a while. She cleaned up the traces of the battlefield. The emotional lines here were very messy and complicated. Countless emotions were piled up in this void. If someone passed by, the best result would be to become a lunatic. She wasn't good at dealing with these emotions. For First Lantern, it was a source of energy, but for her, it was a poison. She lived a simple life and did simple things. Too many emotions would affect her heart. She knew her own situation. She wasn't a strong-willed person. She put on White Lantern and used the power of life to calm down the emotions in this void and let everything return to normal. After cleaning up the battlefield, she found the Pusher trio. They were so busy that smoke came out of their heads. She heard that Batman on Earth was also exhausted. With her help, they didn't speed up the process much, but they were still very happy that the crisis was over. Emotions can give people strength. The simple-minded Supergirl couldn't understand this at all. She frowned and thought for a long time. Thea stood at the side and chatted with Diana. Diana told her about the Silver Swan. To be honest, Thea had no impression of this nickname at all. She had never even heard of it. Mr. Zhuyu suspects that Kane tampered with her spinal implant. That's why her temperament changed so drastically. If we subdue her, we should be able to restore her to her original state. Diana explained the matter to her formally. Thea was displeased. What kind of Tom, Dick, and Harry were jumping out at her? How dare these low-class fellows have designs on Diana? They really don't know how to spell the word death. However, she giggled and said that she didn't mind. Reality proved that Diana knew her very well. Her cunning guesses were spot on. The Valkyrie's beautiful eyes stared at her for a long time. You can't do anything behind my back. Thea was very guilty. That was what she thought. Death Knell was the most suitable person. What could a ballerina do? He killed her with 2 slashes. After that, the earthenware lady would dig a hole to bury her body without anyone knowing. Next, they would bribe the local police to make a missing person report. It was a one-stop service. Finally, there was the underworld waiting for the Silver Swan. Thea would tell her that death wasn't the end, but the beginning. However, now that Diana had made it clear, she wouldn't argue over a small character. She hurriedly changed the topic. Don't worry. By the way, Black Hand killed Hal Jordan and Sinisto. Where is he? Diana almost vomited blood when she changed the topic. If it weren't for Superman and Supergirl beside her, she would have pushed Death Knell down and bullied her. He should be locked up by green light again. She wasn't very sure. Thea didn't need her to be sure. Without the Black Death King, he was nothing. She didn't need to worry at all. She just needed to change the topic about the Silver Swan. With the help of Earth's think tank, the 4 of them restored a total of 15 planets to their original state. Casualties were inevitable in the process. However, as long as they weren't Earthlings, they didn't care much if they didn't die in front of them. After a while, they returned to Earth. It was already 2 hours later. Batman said a few words to them and got up to rest. Mental work was much more tiring than fighting monsters. Usually, he would only sleep for an hour. Today, he wanted to give himself a break and sleep for 2 hours. The rest of the Flash and Mr. Excellent were also exhausted. They said goodbye. Thea and Diana went back to their own villa in the suburbs of London. It was more than 10,000 square meters in total area. It was really strange. Diana wanted to live in Greece, but she worked in France every day. Instead, she chose to live in England. The two changed into their home clothes. Thea quickly pulled the curtains. Diana looked at her from the corner of her eyes. Her eyes were probably saying, "Are you okay? You have to be careful in broad daylight." Not to mention that she had wronged Thea. The two understood each other's thoughts from their actions and looks. The young lady hurriedly said that she was innocent. She tapped Diana's forehead with her finger. "You have such complicated thoughts. Today, I have a trophy for you to see." Then, she took out the first light ring as if she was showing off a treasure. In the dim room, a colorful ring appeared in the palm of her hand. "This ring is also an origin. See if it suits you." With 3 divine positions, Diana was no longer the newbie she used to be. She had her own way of identifying things. Only those that suited her were the best. Otherwise, if she piled up divine positions randomly, it would affect her future development. She felt it with her heart. The Valkyrie frowned. "This thing is too messy. I can't see it." "Is that so?" Thea was a little depressed. It was obviously a very powerful equipment, but no one could use it. This made her very angry. Let's spend some time purifying it. She could only come up with a solution that was not really a solution. The most labor-saving method was still the white light. The white light's purification ability was the best in the universe. However, the emotions in the ring were different from those scattered on the battlefield. They had been entangled with each other for billions of years. It was extremely difficult to use the power of life to calm them down. "Use divine power," Diana said. Divine power could make the impossible possible. The disadvantage was that divine power recovered very slowly. Thea did not want to use it if she could avoid it. Fortunately, the divine power of death could be absorbed during slaughter. It was not too troublesome to replenish it. "I'll go first." A pure black cyclone flashed between Thea's fingers. It rushed into the ring like a dragon. Chapter 946. The divine power of death was full of momentum. There was nothing it could not kill, nothing it could not destroy. it symbolized the end of all things. However, it went in quickly and was also destroyed quickly. In less than 3 seconds, Thea felt that she had lost contact with the divine power. If nothing went wrong, she would be beaten to death by random punches. Many ants could kill an elephant. No matter how strong a single attack was, it would not be able to fight against many enemies. She once again increased the input of divine power, but it was still extinguished by a sea of emotions. Let me try. Seeing her lover being defeated, Diana also became more cautious. One of her fingers flashed with green light, that was courage, and the other hand had little golden light dancing, that was perseverance. Perseverance gave her more and more tenacity. With perseverance, she could move forward with courage. Although Diana was not as strong as Thea now, she was worthy of her identity as the world's protagonist. After breaking through her own limitations, she was very stable. The several divine positions resonated with each other and cooperated very well. Unfortunately, she only lasted for less than 5 seconds before she completely lost contact with her. What to do? This question was placed in front of the two goddesses. Thea's method was to analyze the specific problem. Wasn't it just the remnants of emotions? She first went to the underworld and pulled back the 4 guardians who were waiting in line to be reborn. Thea asked them to take back the emotions in the ring. Your Majesty Goddess, we don't have a body, we can't take back the emotions. There was a hint of cunning in the eyes of the big-headed guardian. His hidden meaning was that they could not do this without a body, but with a body, it would be different. Could you let us be resurrected? If you have a body, are you sure you can take it back? Thea looked at them coldly. This? The 4 guardians looked at each other. They were not sure. If they were not able to fulfill their promise, then it would be terrible. Their hesitation fell into Thea's eyes, causing the goddess of death to sigh. In the face of death, the arrogant and cold guardians began to talk nonsense. With a wave of her hand, she called the Secretary General, Two-Face, over. She pointed at the little blue men and said, Penny, Burton, Bradley, and Hubert, these guys have contributed to the universe after all. For the sake of their past contributions, temporarily stop the reincarnation process and wait for my further news. Previously, you were filled with righteous indignation, as if it wasn't enough for a few little blue people to be reincarnated into pigs. Now that you think it's useful, you immediately feel that they can be saved. You're the one who's saying all the good and bad things. You're even more two-faced than I am. Thea pointed out to the two-faced man one by one again. She matched them to each other, telling them who they were and who they were. There was nothing he could do about it. The names he had registered before were too perfunctory. Names like Passerby 1, 2, 3, 4 were obviously not up to standard. The little blue men gained some value in the young Mrs. Hart. They finally got their names back and got rid of their status as passers-by. After giving the little blue men a suspended sentence, Thea rushed to planet Odium. Ignoring the 4 dead guardians, there were still 2 living guardians here. She went straight to the point and asked Gansersade to take back the emotions in the ring. The process was not very pleasant. After all, she was simply and violently looking for the ring in Gansersade's soul. Gansersade was tormented by her and his defense was greatly reduced. Then, he was hit by the bell of fate. When Thea entered the room, Gansersade was lying on the bed. His breathing was so weak that it was almost inaudible, as if he was dead. Gansersade was furious when she saw the young miss, but she was already past the age of youth. When Thea asked her to take back the emotions, she repeatedly talked about how hard it was for her. She was alone and had to take care of her old boyfriend, Gansersade, and how difficult it was for her. Thinking that she seemed to be a little violent, the goddess of death checked Gansersade. Although he was seriously injured, Gansersade's strength was one of the best among the guardians. Using the divine power of the soul to move back and forth, he slowly woke up. After that, the two extracted their own emotions in the ring according to the agreement. Theo looked at the results and was both happy and worried. The good news was that she could extract the emotions, but the bad news was that there were nearly 50 personal emotions in the ring. In other words, there were 50 guardians who participated in the creation of the first ring. Hundreds of millions of years had passed. Some fled to Xamalan and established the Purple Lantern Corps. Most of them died in battle, like the 3 who were killed by Raven in the Dark Knight, and Scarface who committed suicide after the Dark Knight, plus the one who merged with the Parallax monster and was killed by them in Seaside City, and those who were sacrificed in the years before. There were 50 of them, but now she secretly imprisoned one. There were 2 in front of her, 8 guardians of the First Lantern Corps, and only 11 of them were left. The rest were basically dead. If Thea wanted to use this method to completely solve the emotional problem of the ring, the best way was to go back 10 billion years, like the First Lantern Corps, and persuade them to take back their emotions while they were still full. She hesitated for a moment, feeling that the risk was too high. The little blue man's strength was very interesting. At first, he was so strong that he had no friends. Kalana killed Gao Tianzuan and Star Swallowing in seconds. This was an example. After that, he became weaker and weaker. Today, he was reduced to the same level as Superman. Superman squinted his eyes and was speechless. Wearing the ring, the First Lantern Corps in its peak state must be very powerful. If they could seal such a powerful First Lantern, if Thea went back and fought 50 of them, her ending would not be much better than the First Lantern Corps. It was not worth the risk for a dispensable ring. Besides, it was not that there was no other way, it was just more troublesome. Everything would usher in death, and emotions were no exception. Dripping water could penetrate a stone. Divine power could not bear to use it, and it could slowly wear it down with the aura of death. There were plenty of people in the underworld that could be ordered around. After returning to the underworld, she set up a new purification room next to her own giant statue in the Death Temple. The reason she made it public was definitely not to get all people to provide death aura to help her purify the ring. Her explanation was to let the intelligent beings pay their respects here, look at the colorful ring, and remember their lost emotions. Those who were muddle-headed and unconscious could not provide much death aura. Although there were not many who still had their own consciousness in the underworld, the number was huge. After all, there were 52 parallel universes and even more small worlds. Every planet and every world had some outstanding people. This number could be said to be terrifying when accumulated. Countless elites received the order to pay their respects. Although they did not understand the purpose, seeing that they did not lose anything, they did it either for real or for fake reasons. Thea also gave out some benefits at the right time. For example, for those who were sincere, she provided them with some positions in the underworld for them to choose from. Those who were elites in their previous lives were willing to start a new life. Naturally, there were also those who were willing to keep their memories and continue to shine in the underworld. Many people felt that it was a good thing to be able to live forever in this state. For example, the 4 advisors by Thea's side now. Chapter 947. In the end, the 4 little blue men were not sent to reincarnate. Their knowledge was a huge treasure, and reincarnating them would be a waste. Thea read Haruba's life memories, which contained countless secrets of the universe, but this was not everything. The guardians were not tied together all the time. They each had their own tasks, and Haruba was only responsible for a part of it. In the end, Thea did not let them reincarnate. She used the title of a consultant to protect the 4 little blue men. It was not difficult to make a temporary body. If Circe could do it, it would not be difficult for her. After all, she could not leave the underworld. The 4 little blue men transformed into the first batch of temporary workers in the underworld. Their main job was to give suggestions. After all, Xia's grassroots team still had a lot of problems, and the insiders might automatically overlook some of the work, but these little blue men could look at the problem from an outsider's point of view and find fault with it. The little blue men had bodies, and could finally fly again. It was not a good feeling to walk on 2 feet and look up at everyone. They took back the emotions in the ring. In order to show their loyalty, they each took out a part of their memories. With their cooperation, Thea finally saw the complete forging process of the first lamp ring. The guardians were very strong in the beginning. They easily captured the source of emotions. Unfortunately, eternal life and infinite wisdom prevented them from walking the path of the new gods. Instead, they tried to decipher the mysteries. At this time, First Lamp came to them. He brought with him a technology from billions of years in the future. Everyone worked together to transform the source into a ring. Now, they needed to reverse the process. It was not easy without the help of the little blue men. I see your intentions, but resurrection is impossible. The underworld, or rather the world's will, has high requirements for the resurrection of the long-lived species. You obviously do not meet the requirements. Xia was not lying. The long-lived species were basically the life forms at the beginning of the universe. Now that time had passed, the universe no longer needed them. It needed passion and constant change. In just a few decades, they would be able to bloom with endless brilliance. Only this could help the universe evolve to a higher level. Immortals that were like stagnant water were now like malignant tumors. Lady Styx, Attikitis, and these guys in front of him could tell that without Thea's help, Lady Styx would not be able to level up in another 100 million years. These little blue people were dropping levels every day. The universe's will did not hide its rejection of them. The leader of the blue men, Big Head Hobart, still spoke on behalf of the group. This was a habit that they would not be able to change anytime soon. Your Majesty, we are very comfortable here. We don't want to be resurrected. Thea nodded. She was too lazy to think about whether they were sincere or not, as long as they could be of use to her. The matter of purifying the rings was left to them. Thea made another trip to the Blue Lantern main planet. Kyle Rayner was still training in seclusion. She gave him a few simple pointers and turned back to Earth. The matter of the Third Army was not a big deal. It was not a big deal to Earth, but it was not a small matter either. Just look at the planets that were ravaged by the Third Army. Without Superman and Diana's combat power to kill in the early stages, once the Third Army overflowed, it would be a disaster. Now that the battle was over, the Righteous Alliance was ready to have a meeting to discuss what to do in the future. It was worth mentioning that because Kyle was left on the Blue Lantern main planet, the Green Lantern representative on Earth had changed again. Simon Baz, the Arabian Green Lantern, was sitting nervously in the Green Lantern's exclusive seat. In addition, Thea's unspeakable relative, Black Canary Laurel Lance, had also officially joined the Righteous Alliance. Laurel was a late bloomer. No one knew what stimulated her, but her strength improved by leaps and bounds. Her sonic attack and her own hard work finally made her into the ranks of the first-line heroes. She stepped into the Righteous Alliance's door one step ahead of Batgirl Barbara. First of all, they welcomed the 2 new companions. Secondly, Superman directly asked everyone what safety measures should be set up on Earth in the future. In the past, this question was raised by Batman. It was rare today. Superman saw more than 10 planets suffer disasters. He could not help it. He had to do something. Many people on Earth did not realize what had happened, but he knew. He saw it with his own eyes. The Third Army assimilated intelligent life. The First Lanterns threw the entire planet around like sandbags. Countless lives were wailing and wandering between life and death. If all of this fell on Earth, on the heads of his relatives, what should he do? Seeing these tragic scenes with his own eyes, Superman could not sleep all night. At the beginning of the meeting, He threw out this question, hoping that someone could help him solve his doubts. Will there be similar disasters in the universe? According to some convention, the Green Lantern was in charge of all problems in the universe. Several people looked at Simon Baz in unison. The Arabian Green Lantern was dumbfounded. You're asking me about everything. Just a day ago, I was chased by many agents on the road for stealing a car. Now you're asking me about disasters in the universe? How could I know? The Missy coughed twice, indicating that she had something to say. Superman, your definition is too broad. The disasters we are facing now are actually caused by certain individuals. It is not an earthquake or a hurricane. It is difficult to make a reasonable and accurate prediction. But Madame Xanadu can make a prediction. Am I right? You should be able to do it too, right? Batman resisted mentioning Old Ma's name. Prophecies require a price. Time is a long river. The prophet is like a fish in the river. It jumps up with all its might and sees the road ahead. However, the price is that it loses its original position and is covered in injuries. Thea avoided talking about herself. Madame Xanadu was now a relative she could not mention. After becoming the Lord of Hell, there was no need for Old Ma to appear. Thea spent time helping her sort out the burden on the timeline. Now, Madame Xanadu had finally recovered 40 to 50% of her strength. She did not explicitly refuse, but what she meant was that she did not advocate sacrificing someone to save Earth. Superheroes could basically reach a consensus on this point. Sacrificing the innocent in exchange for justice was not justice. Then do you mean that we can only passively defend? Superman asked. Thea thought for a moment. She asked in return, if a person did not make a mistake, would you arrest him for something in the future? No, at least I won't. The Flash immediately spoke, but then he reiterated that this was only his opinion. We won't either. Batman also nodded, but Thea could tell from his eyes that he wanted to collect all kinds of information about the other party first and carefully write down a notebook of information. Once the other party committed a crime, they would be arrested immediately. All right then, we've reached a consensus on this point. I'll just tell you what I've seen and heard for your reference. There's a group of people, and they're very evil. Sia was interrupted before she could finish. Chapter 948. Is it Darkseid? Batman still remembered the invincible power of the evil lord. Is it an alien? Superman was worried about his relatives. Neither. Do you know about parallel universes? Everyone nodded. The Flash and the others teamed up with Dr. Wells on Earth 2 every day, so they naturally knew about parallel universes. Batman had also seen Thomas Wayne on Earth 2 from afar, so he was no stranger to this concept. There is such a parallel universe. Although the code names are different, the Superman, Batman, Speedster, Green Lantern, and Neptune are all evil. Of course, I'm even more evil there. The Kryptonians there use kryptonite as their energy source, and they commit all kinds of crimes. At night, Gotham is also ruled by a man in black. The speedy ones kill the innocent for fun, and the rest are their accomplices. Currently, this dimension does not intend to invade us, but I would like to ask all of you, what do you plan to do after knowing this? A dimension full of bad guys. Thea told them about Earth 3, and Guangdong's investigation showed that the evil Thea came from there too. As for whether she was still there, Guangdong could not be sure. A huge barrier covered Earth 3, and the new gods could not enter at all. A few of his subordinates suppressed to the level of ordinary people and entered the barrier, but they were limited by their abilities and could not get any high-level information. Thea thought about it several times. Whether the evil version of herself was controlling Tian Shou or being controlled by Tian Shou, they would have to fight. The Anti-Watcher was also recovering there. If he had absorbed the energy of the entire universe of Earth 3, it would be difficult to deal with him. Thea wanted to organize an expedition to Earth 3. She had even thought of the code name, Eternal Justice. She was working on her plan, and the people of the Alliance were also digesting the information she told them. They did not provoke us, and we're going to fight them. Was this the act of a hero? Everyone was thinking. It was normal for heroes to be schemed against by their enemies in the dark. Then, they would suddenly attack and lose their armor. They were not masochists. Who would like to live their lives in fear? But the enemy had not done anything yet. If they went to fight them, it would go against their principles. Do you have any further evidence? Or images of that world? Batman asked. Wait here, I'll look for it. After saying that, Thea closed her eyes and scanned the entire Earth with her psychic power. All kinds of shielding devices and black technology were useless in the face of death. She quickly found the target. Spatial displacement was too easy for her. As long as the target stood in front of people, everything would be revealed. However, there was still a small problem in the Alliance that needed to be solved. She whispered a few words to Diana, and they quickly reached a consensus that this matter could be done. Thea gave Batman a strange look. The other party has already begun to plot against us. They sent 2 people to act as the vanguard. You can't catch them? Superman asked tentatively. The eldest Mish chuckled. If this person walks into the Hall of Justice, because his appearance is too obvious, then the true identity of one of us here will be officially exposed. Although she didn't say it directly, everyone knew that she was referring to Batman. The scene fell into silence for a while. We are the Justice League. Even if we can't share each other's past, we should accept each other's true identity. I'm Clark Kent. Superman was the first to speak. Thea Quinn. Diana Prince. The Flash took off his hood. He had been waiting for this day for a long time. Barry Allen. The Green Arrow also took off his hood and said in a low voice, Oliver Queen. Arthur Curry. Ray Palmer. Zatanna Zatara. The 2 newcomers didn't know what was going on, but they still took off their masks. Laurel Lance. Simon Bartz. Nightwing hesitated for a long time. He was in the same boat as Batman, but when he thought of leaving those wings in order to find his own path, he made up his mind and took off his mask. I'm Dick Grayson. For a moment, all the pressure fell on Batman. He was a little tired, but also a little relaxed. Nightwing had been exposed, so there was no point in hiding. He finally took off his mask. Bruce Wayne. He hadn't seen the sun for a long time, so his face was a little pale. There was enough light in the Hall of Justice. Looking directly at the broken light through the glass, Batman felt a little awkward. In fact, many people knew his true identity. Now, he was just taking off his mask. He quickly adjusted his state of mind. He was very unhappy with Thea forcing him to state his position. He rubbed his forehead. Can you tell me now? Who are the people sent by the evil plane? Thea didn't directly teleport. She looked from afar again. They've gathered a few villains from Earth. Should I directly teleport a leader or pull all of them over? If all of them are pulled over, we have to prepare for battle. Was there a need to say that? Good and evil couldn't coexist. With so many heroes suddenly attacking a bunch of villains, was there anything more satisfying than this? Even the Flash wanted to fight, right now. The young mistress clicked her tongue and expressed her appreciation for the heroes' enthusiasm for battle. She motioned for them to put on their masks. With a light tap of her finger, under Zatanna's respectful gaze, she quickly drew countless complicated lines in the air. Prepare to welcome our visitor from afar, Mr. Alfred Penisworth from Earth 3. Hearing her say this, even though Batman had some guesses, he was still very surprised. He thought that it might be the counterpart of someone around him on Earth 3, but he really didn't expect it to be the old butler. Phoo. If the other old butler stood in front of everyone as a bad guy, Bruce Wayne's disguise would indeed be lost. After the Azure teleportation array activated and the light disappeared, the four strangers panicked and found that they were surrounded by people from the Righteous Alliance. Batman immediately saw the old man standing in the middle. He looked exactly the same as the old butler, but his temperament was completely different. The old man's face was pale and he was wearing a purple suit. The more he looked at him, the more familiar he looked. Thea seemed to know what he was thinking and gave him the answer. This Mr. Penisworth killed the clown on their side. Yes, the clown who fought against Batman's tyranny for freedom and democracy. A sense of confusion filled Batman's heart. The other party's evil aura lingered. Just based on his intuition, he felt that the other party was not here to discuss friendly relations and establish a harmonious parallel space. There was nothing to say. Let's fight. The heroes were sharpening their swords and were already prepared. A few villains wouldn't do. It was impossible to make the villains fight to the death without retreating. Even though the evil old butler asked them to charge together, they agreed verbally, but in reality, each of them had their own plans. Giantess, you open the way. Copperhead, you cover. Shadow Stealer, bring up the rear. The evil old butler quickly issued the order. Even though he was in a hopeless situation, he still didn't give up and was still trying to find a chance of survival. Chapter 949. The appearance of the woman called Giganteus could be said to be exaggerated. She had a head full of long, fluffy hair, and bulging muscles. She wore a leather vest, and her entire body was filled with a murderous aura. One could not see the gentleness and charm of a woman at all. She looked like a bandit who had taken over a mountain and declared herself king. It was impossible to tell that she was a woman without looking closely. She took a deep breath, and her body expanded rapidly like a balloon. Soon, she broke through the human limit and moved toward a height of 5 meters, then 10 meters. Tisk, boring trick. The young lady sneered from a distance. If she was allowed to grow, her hull would be destroyed, and it would cost money to repair it. Considering the issue of justice, it was not convenient to use death magic, but casting a few transformation spells was not difficult for her. Thea was not as proficient in transformation as Circe, but she was definitely good at it. Let's go. Whether it was a technological mutation or a bloodline mutation, with a shrinking spell, the opponent's body returned to the size of a normal person. Laurel, who had just joined the team and was eager to make a contribution, rushed forward with a whip kick. I've collected information about these 3 guys. The woman is a giant morphing woman who mutated due to a blood disease. Copperhead is good at military combat and jujitsu. There's not much information about the other Shadow Stealer. He should be a psychic. Batman didn't join the battle, but talked about them from the periphery. Thea interjected halfway, I teleported 5 people here, and there's one more. Atom Man, you search for him. Knowing that he had a part to play in the battle, Atom Man quickly shrank and searched for the enemy hiding in the dark. The battle ended quickly, but it couldn't be slow. After all, it was 12 top heroes against 4. Even if Thea and Diana didn't make a move, the villains were beaten to a pulp. Black Canary defeated the giant morphing woman, and Green Arrow also captured Copperhead. The Shadow Stealer was a little more troublesome. He could hide in the enemy's shadow, which was a combination of offense and defense. Zatanna saw the opportunity and released a flash to remove the shadows in the room. Then the flash stunned the enemy with a speed far beyond the enemy's reflexes. The evil old butler didn't have any superpowers. He only carried a pistol with him and was easily taken down by Nightwing. The Atom Man's battle did not go well. The enemy was very cunning and hid several times. In this microscopic world, outsiders could not help much. In the end, it was Superman who found the enemy with his supervision and captured the enemy with the help of the Atom Man. It wasn't hard to tell if a local criminal was an outsider or not. What Batman knew definitely belonged to the locals, and vice versa. That was how authoritative Batman was. Copperhead Snake, Gigantified Woman, and Shadow Stealer were all people who betrayed their own plane's information and acted as accomplices for the sake of benefits. Their actions were greatly despised by the heroes. Theo was in charge of contacting them, and all of them were imprisoned in the Heaven's Eye Society. Let Black Amanda have her way with them. After the accomplices were sent away, the two main culprits became the key points. Ray Palmer untied the belt of the original child. It was her shrinking equipment. Without the belt, the original child finally returned to her normal size. She had long brown hair and a pretty face. However, at this time, her eyes were closed and she did not say a word. She seemed to be ready to fight to the death, but the slight trembling of the corners of her mouth showed that she was not calm inside. The evil version of the butler was much calmer. He looked around the Hall of Justice and compared the appearance of the heroes with the images in his memory. Although he had been on Earth for a while, it was the first time he saw the superheroes of this world face to face. A strange sense of confusion lingered in his heart. The completely opposite world made him want to laugh. However, his heart was as hard as stone. He quickly put away his messy thoughts and said to the original child in a cold voice, "Calm down. They are heroes with high moral standards. Our lives are completely guaranteed." After that, he showed a provocative smile, which roughly meant that they could kill him if they could. The people of the Righteous Alliance had a tacit understanding. They gave Batman space. "I can see the struggle in your heart. You have the ability to break the shackles. Why don't you do it?" The evil old butler's voice was somewhat bewitching. He looked at Batman curiously. The people of the Righteous Alliance did not react. If they could be bewitched by a few words, Batman would not be Batman. Thea was even more relieved. Among all the people and gods she had met, Batman's willpower was the best. It did not mean that the stronger the power, the stronger the willpower. It seemed to be inversely proportional. She was a good example. Ghosts, strangers, they all had low willpower. The longer you lived, the lower your willpower. It seemed to be an iron law of this world. Batman looked at the evil old butler curiously. "You don't know me." "Not at all. The one in that evil world should not be me. I thought it was the other me who had fallen. Now it seems that's not the case." He turned to ask Thea. Thea spread her hands indifferently. "That world is sealed by a higher power. I can't enter it anymore. Maybe there was an error in the transmission of the information. If you want to know more, magic can help you pry open his mouth." Batman thought about it carefully. "No, let me interrogate him alone." Then he pulled the evil old butler to the next room. The rest of the people could not help but look at the original children, but no one proposed to torture them. Women did not know much and participated in the core information. This was the common view nowadays. How many men were there in the heroes and how many women were there? How many men were there in the villains and how many women were there? How many men were there in the big bosses? Were there any women other than Thea? Women were looked down upon in this world, or rather protected. They were basically there as assistants. Except for the Atom Man, who was studying the original children's belts, the rest of the people were either resting or chatting with each other. For example, Olivier and Laurel, who had been lovers in the past, had all kinds of disputes. Now that they were in the same room, Sia felt that the relationship between the two of them was awkward. However, the two of them were chatting and laughing, and their conversation was quite good. Superman and the Flash also talked about the evil Kryptonians and the evil Ultralisks. Batman soon came out. He did not look too good. He took the original children away and interrogated them separately. When he returned to the hall, he took off his mask, put his hands on the table, and organized his words. Bruce Wayne in that world was shot when he was young. Now the person who rules Gotham is a guy called Night Owl, a member of the Wayne family that does not exist in this world. He is my brother, Thomas Wayne Jr. Night Owl's assistant is also Nightwing, the evil gang member Richard Grayson. In addition, a Kryptonian also landed there. His code name is Super Overlord, which should correspond to Superman, the Flash's Johnny Quick, the Green Lantern's Divine Ring, Diana's Super Queen, Neptune's Ocean Overlord, and Firestorm's Deathstorm. Chapter 950. Batman told her what he had learned. There seems to be another Luthor in that world, but he's not like them. He's even more evil and can use magic. Thea did not say anything. She felt that evil Luthor's magic was taught by evil Thea. As the vengeful spirit of God's predecessor, magic was really just a minor skill. Everyone, the enemy has bared their fangs at us. If we don't strike first, doomsday will be waiting for us. Also, if the battlefield is on that earth, we have less to worry about. Seeing that no one said anything, Thea had no choice but to take the lead. Starting a war would definitely affect her reputation, but she did not care about that. The enemy was already coming for them. They were not so pedantic and agreed to fight. However, none of them had any experience in fighting across dimensions, so they could only look at Thea. Like I said, the new gods in that dimension have another name, but let's call it Earth 3. She confirmed the target first. It's sealed by a powerful barrier. I can't get in. Diana, Superman, the Flash, and all the other superpowered heroes can't get in. The evil superpowered villains can't get out without special means. That's why they sent Butler Pennyworth as the vanguard. Batman nodded, indicating that he was aware of this information. However, his mind was sharp, and he quickly realized a problem. Who sealed it? We call him the Anti-Watcher. Actually, you should have seen him before. He was the one who was resurrected from the Black Lantern's power source on the darkest night, Thea answered. Batman immediately asked, is he more powerful than Darkseid? Thea took a long time to think about this question. Batman's question was too amateur, so she had to answer it in a more general way. Strictly speaking, the Anti-Watcher is far more powerful than Darkseid. Batman's eyes widened. Thea took another turn. The Anti-Supervisor is different from us new gods. We have a ceiling, and once we reach a certain level, we can't go any further. It's the same for me and Darkseid, but the Anti-Supervisor is different. He has no ceiling. Batman's posture was a little messy. How was he supposed to fight like this? However, he was very patient. He hugged his elbows and continued to listen. Thea frowned. That's like asking me whether an atomic bomb or an atomic bomb can kill. Darkseid and anti-surveillance are completely different. Darkseid is a conqueror. He wants all life to submit to him. How evil! The Flash whispered. The Anti-Watcher wants to destroy the universe. The more he destroys, the stronger he becomes. This one is even more evil. The Flash exclaimed again. Thea glared at him, and the guy finally shut up. You mean to say that this counter-supervisor is currently very weak? You want to kill him when he's weak. Am I right? Batman thought that he knew her very well. She must have her own reasons for putting so much effort into this. Thea denied. The Anti-Supervisor is not a threat to me. I can say that he's not much of a threat. If I just sit back and do nothing, we have no conflict of interest. Destroying the multiverse is a mission engraved in his soul. He's like a program, tirelessly destroying one universe after another. Every time he destroys a universe, he absorbs all the power of that universe. That's the source of his power. When all the universes are destroyed, he will enter a new form. Maybe it's a reboot, or something else. Anyway, I haven't seen it before. When he destroys the universe, I can hide outside the universe. I have this ability. I can take my family, friends, and everyone with me. But are you willing to do that? Are you going to sit back and watch the universe be destroyed while you run away? No one was willing to run away in the face of danger. Compared to his evil counterparts, the anti-supervisor was more of a threat. The heroes were full of sacrifice and had high moral values. Thea, who had broken moral values, was also the advocate. In the end, all of them approved the plan to invade Earth-3. Since the anti-supervisor only had a sliver of HP left, now was the best time to kill him. Even Batman thought that they could fight. But this was not a street fight. One Earth was going to attack another Earth, and countless preparations needed to be done. First, they needed to get first-hand information. Interrogation alone was definitely not enough. The main alliance needed someone to be the front line. Even the superhumans could not get through, and half of them would be eliminated. This mission. Batman was about to volunteer when he was interrupted by Nightwing. Bruce, Gotham still needs you. Let me go. As a heroine, Laurel was unwilling to pass on her responsibility. Green Arrow also volunteered to help. Even the Atom Man said that since the original children could come, it was only natural for him to go. He was very suitable for gathering information in his atomic form. The 5 superheroes talked about each other's strengths and weaknesses. They all wanted to take on this dangerous mission. They first eliminated Batman for the same reason. He was a tall tree that attracted too much attention, and it was good for him to be a behind-the-scenes commander. He could forget about charging into battle. After all, he was old and had not fully recovered from his injuries from the battle with Darkseid. Green Arrow was the second to be eliminated. She was already considered an enhanced person. Thea felt that she would not be able to get through. Besides, Star City could not do without her. The focus finally fell on Black Canary, Nightwing, and the Atom Man. Seeing that they were arguing passionately, Thea held her coffee cup and watched the show. She did not have the heart to interrupt. It was not until Diana poked her under the ribs that she spoke. There's a small problem. Diana glared at her. Thea quickly changed her words. I haven't figured out how to get to Earth-3. Nightwing had the upper hand. As Batman's successor, he had an overwhelming advantage whether it was combat, reconnaissance, interrogation, or infiltration. If all 3 went, he would be the leader. If there was only one spot, it would be his. He did not expect Missy to come to a sudden halt. After arguing for so long, it turned out that there was still a problem. Was this a problem? You guys have been trying for so long. Can't you find a way? Sia smiled at Nightwing, who had an ugly expression on his face as he forced himself to swallow a mouthful of blood. She felt helpless as well. The mother box had already been sealed off on Earth-3. Even all interdimensional teleportation methods had been sealed off. Even her Anka amulet could not. The official Sister of Death could certainly ignore it, but she, as a reserve, could not. Then how did the 2 of them get here? One-way teleportation. Batman still had a lot of questions, but he did ask the main point. How did they invade us? They must have some means to get here, right? What about after conquering us? Will they go back? Batman turned into a million whys and threw a bunch of questions at Thea. Chapter 951. Thea could only answer them one by one. First of all, the 2 of them should have come here before the blockade. The Anti-Watcher was seriously injured at that time. He was in the interdimensional blockade. In terms of time, it was only a moment, but in that plane, the abnormal weather may last for several days. So, there will be a gap in his blockade. At that time, ordinary people can come here. In order to send our companions over, we have to break the blockade without alerting them. So, I'm stuck at this step. As for how they came here, I don't think it's important. After all, we're going to fight our way over. Why should we care what they do? Batman looked at her for a long time with a stern face. I think you'd better tell us. The hidden danger needs to be eliminated in time. You were the one who shouted that there should be no secrets in the couplet and forced me to reveal my identity. I remember it very clearly. Tell me your secret out loud. Superman thought that they should take precautions in advance. At the same time, Diana thought for a while and felt that they should make it clear. The Valkyrie meant that one person's wisdom was shorter than others. Perhaps there were details that she did not consider. Everyone should think of a solution together. Thea scratched her head. It's very troublesome. It will take a lot of time. I need to find 2 people. Batman said, Go ahead. I have a lot of time now. The young lady teleported away and returned to the Hall of Justice in less than half an hour. There was a man and a woman beside her. She first introduced the blonde man beside her. Well, many of you may know this gentleman. He is the deputy commander of the Sky's Eye Society, Mr. Steve Trevor. The item we will discuss later is currently in the hands of the Sky's Eye Society. Then she pointed to the woman on the other side. Barry has seen this lady before. She is Ms. Pandora. She has lived alone on Earth for thousands of years. She is a living legend. After that, she signaled Steve to open the box he carried with him. Superheroes had a good reputation. Steve was not worried about the safety here. He opened the metal box he carried with him. Wearing heavy gloves, he took out a dazzling golden skull. Damn it, you didn't tell me. This is what he brought with him. Pandora, who was still a little nervous, quickly pulled out 2 guns. It seemed that she was ready to fight another non-existent enemy. Thea comforted her and told her that it was safe here. There were no 7 deadly sins or the old wizard. Those were all her obsessions. Steve was also shocked by her. He thought that the woman was going to rob him. He stood in front of the golden skull, but his body did not touch it directly. Everyone in the Righteous Alliance was on their guard. However, they were different from the brats of the young titans. They had long since passed the age of rashness. All of them were staring at Pandora. This story is a bit long, so I'll keep it short. She pointed at the golden skull, ignoring Batman's probing gaze. Thousands of years ago, this thing fell onto Earth. According to my analysis, its function is to act as a coordinate. There should be something similar on Earth 3. They work together to open a channel. What did you say? Before anyone from the Righteous Alliance could react, Pandora exploded. She pointed at the golden skeleton in disbelief. This thing is a coordinate. Pandora's mental state was much stronger than it was at the same time in the original spacetime. At least, she was no longer entangled in the guilt of releasing the 7 deadly sins. However, she still could not accept that the culprit who caused her thousands of years of suffering was actually a coordinate. Thea also felt that it was ridiculous, but it was the truth. Those guys on Earth 3 were also stupid. Couldn't they have been more low-key when it came to teleporting coordinates? Couldn't they have disguised it as a stone and thrown it over? If they were afraid that the evil old butler could not find it, they could have made a locator or something. If they could teleport across dimensions, how could they not be able to locate it? In the end, these guys made a very flashy and evil golden skull shape. Later on, perhaps because they were too eager and used too much force, they threw it to this side of Earth thousands of years ago. It was seen by the old muddle-headed Shazan, causing Pandora to be the scapegoat of the world. Now, Pandora was sullen in her heart. When she understood the truth of the matter, she was about to vomit. However, serious illness required serious medicine. She still had to make it clear. This thing is just a coordinate. It has no other purpose. I can guarantee that everything that the wizard Shazan said was his subjective imagination. After saying that, she reached out to grab the golden skull. Steve shouted, "Be careful, it will bewitch your mind." Thea acted as if she did not hear him. She grabbed the skull in her hand. It was light and only weighed a few kilograms. The golden skull was one size bigger than a normal human skull, and there seemed to be a very evil red light in its eye sockets. It looked completely evil. No wonder the old Shazan thought that there was something wrong with it. Not only him, but since ancient times, this skull had fallen into the hands of many people. Many of the archmages, especially the evil archmages, had studied it. They all felt that there was a secret in it, but unfortunately, they did not find anything. Such a piece of technological equipment had been studied by a group of evil archmages. Naturally, it was contaminated with a lot of magic. After a long time, it had a bewitching effect on ordinary people. Thea wiped away the magic residue on it. This thing is modeled after the mother box. The specific effects are a little different, but the difference is not big. It is definitely a piece of technological equipment. Batman knew that he could try it. Without saying anything, he picked it up and studied it. After a long time, he said thoughtfully, "The technology here is very advanced. It will be difficult for me to crack it in a short time." Thea clapped her hands. She would leave it to him. It was a little difficult to enter without being noticed by the anti-surveillance team with magic and divine power. Technological equipment should be a good way. Steve saw that the people of the Alliance were looking at the golden skull like beating drums and passing flowers. His face was strange. "Miss Quinn, this thing, Commander Trevor, I will explain to the President. This is just the beginning. We still need to cooperate with several parties in the future." When the President was mentioned, the patriotic old young man Steve was defeated. Pandora knew that they were going to attack Earth-3. Filled with righteous indignation, she said that she would also join the battle and seek justice from the culprits who had harmed her life. Several technological heroes and Batman worked together to study anti-teleportation. Before Thea left, she called Batman again. "Tell Alfred to get ready. I think the Pentagon will most likely send him a message. You want the army to go too? How fresh. We can't just go with the 12 of us, right? There is also a government in that world. Without the cooperation of the military, we can't fight so many enemies. Not only the army, but all the heroes' forces, the International Justice League, the Alliance of Women, the Dark Alliance that Madame Xanadu is forming, the Young Titans, and even the Suicide Squad and the Rogue Gang. I am going to pull them all." Chapter 952. In fact, the number of people participating in the war is not as many as you think. We can't send all of them. After all, the Earth here still needs to be protected. I can't go to war easily. Diana's power has exceeded the limit of the planet's battle. We don't know if the environment there is suitable for the Kryptonians. The 3 powerful Kryptonians on our side won't go there immediately. The Martian hunter is now focused on the Earth. He won't join the Alliance. He won't go if the enemy doesn't come. You see. Thea explained to him while counting her fingers. In addition, the Green Lantern has no emotional supplement in that universe. There is no energy battery charging there. The 7 Lantern Corps is our important ally, but without emotional motivation, they are not as good as an American soldier. Batman's face fell. 4 of the 7 veterans could not go to war. The Flash was the only one who could fight. You mean to let ordinary superheroes take the lead? No, I'll think about the 7 Lantern Corps later. They have to participate in the war. The environment of the Earth there is not easy to judge. Now it's just a preliminary plan. Everything has to wait for the results of the investigation before it can be confirmed. This is a war, not a fight against street crime. She was not telling the truth. At her current level, she had a vague idea of many things. Besides, she had worn a white lantern before. Many seemingly mysterious matters had their own explanations. Every universe actually had its own operating laws. For example, the current universe was righteous. It had to be righteous. No matter how evil jumped around, it would definitely be defeated in the end. This was the rule of the universe. The three laws of the earth were evil. No matter how hard the righteous tried, they would fail. If there was a large-scale invasion, Thea would have to spend a lot of effort to suppress the will of the world there. This was the main reason why she could not participate in the war in time. However, there was no need to say such things that would affect the world. Leaving Batman to ponder, she returned to the White House. The work of persuading her mother was unusually smooth. To be honest, when Moira first took over the presidency, she was a little desperate. It was similar to showing the true colors of a hero when the sea was turbulent. However, after the novelty, what was left was countless troubles and all kinds of emergencies. As the president, she was tired of dealing with them. Now that she heard that they were going to fight the enemy outside the country, she fully supported it. Superheroes had to wait for a while to consider moral factors, reputation, and a lot of other issues. As a politician, she did not have these burdens, especially when the enemy had sent an advance team. What else could she say? Fight, fight now, fight now. After communicating with a few important members of Congress, the results were very gratifying. As politicians, they were also under a lot of pressure. They were tortured by all kinds of aliens and bad guys every few days. What could they say now? Could he fight his way out? Support, of course they had to support. The voters did not care about justice. Of course, justice was the best. They only needed to know that they were on the stronger side. The Congress was very easy to convince. As expected, the military encountered some doubts. They did not need to be responsible for the voters, but if there were too many casualties, they might be assassinated by the families of the deceased. This was the bad thing about the proliferation of guns. Doctors and teachers now had to carry guns for work. There was too much social pressure. The generals were very hesitant. At this time, the real and fake Alfred came in handy. They had to make them realize that if they didn't shoot first, the other party would come for them. 3 days later, Thea welcomed Bruce Wayne and the old butler, Fu, in front of the Pentagon. Only then did Thea realize that the old butler was not a retired British paratrooper. He was a British secret agent. It belonged to the MI6 and specialized in dealing with external matters. The famous 007 was theoretically the old man's colleague. Thea really wanted to ask if the old man's code name was 006 or 008. Fu came to the United States alone after World War II, under the background of the Great Depression, and lurked in the Wayne family for 40 years. The Wayne family now had few members. Before, they were the most famous of the famous families. Half of the properties in Gotham City were under their name. They were the way banching from head to toe. Sending an elite secret agent like the old butler to do undercover work meant that the British had prepared a big game of chess. Unfortunately, the empire on which the sun never set was a thing of the past. The old butler was not used. After that, because of his connection with the young Bruce, the two of them were like father and son until today. My identity won't cause any misunderstandings, right? Before entering the door, the old butler asked in a low voice. Thea assured the old man that there would be no problem. The relationship between the two countries had changed long ago. You can retire in the Wayne family. The old butler, Fu, was overthinking. The generals did not care at all whether he was a British secret agent or not. Of course, it was also because he was too old. Such an old man, and with Thea and Bruce's face, they could not search him and force him to answer. The military was more pressured than the White House in Congress. If they could not protect the citizens, what was the point of having them? However, in the face of all kinds of sudden disasters, it was useless no matter who was the leader. Louise's father, General Ryan, had been the Minister of Defense for 4 years and was about to have a nervous breakdown. Of course, they liked to fight the enemy, not be beaten by the enemy. Catching the enemy off guard, running into the enemy's house to kill and burn, was there anything happier in life? However, they could not just listen to rumors. They had to weigh the pros and cons, and confirm the authenticity of the information. The evil version of the old butler had been handed over to the Pentagon, and the military had their own methods of interrogation. Now that they saw the kind version of the old butler, the generals could not help but be amazed. It was not that they did not know about the parallel universe, but they had always felt that it was very far away. Now, they finally saw a living person, a bad person who came from the parallel universe and was ready to invade Earth, and a good person who had always been obedient. The two Alfreds had completely different personalities and temperaments, but they were both very capable. There was no doubt about that. After all, they were the top agents of their time, so Alfred could not be too bad. The generals had a rough idea. If the enemy wanted to invade Earth, then they had to fight. It was better to fight early than late. However, they were just support, and the decisive power was still on the side of the heroes. The reconnaissance of the advance troops was very important. Batman continued to study the reverse channel. It was not difficult to open it, but the difficult part was to open it without attracting the enemy's attention. Nightwing's job was to hide and investigate, not to invade. Batman's progress was not that great. Later on, after a discussion with the elders, they added Luthor to the team. His intelligence was not to be underestimated. When he heard that they were going to invade another Earth, Baldy Luthor was very interested and came to help with the rations. Superman emphasized that this was not an invasion, but a battle to defend their home against evil. Luthor scoffed, but he did not argue with the Righteous Alliance. They could call it whatever they wanted. With the addition of Luthor, Batman and Mr. Excellent, the three most intelligent scientists on Earth, worked together to decipher the Golden Skull at a much faster speed. Chapter 953. The anti-decryption work was carried out simultaneously with the mobilization of the military. Thea went to the universe alone to find help. Her sharp bugs could not be sent out to fight alongside the Earthlings. The bugs did not look righteous. Her goal was still the 7 Lantern Corps that Batman mentioned. Black and White Lantern Corps were actually their troubles. She had helped them a lot, and they had to contribute to the dimensional war. However, the Lantern Corps could not use the Lantern Ring in the parallel universe. After a few discussions, the 4 advisors of the underworld helped her solve this problem. The Lantern Ring was filled with countless emotions. It could replace the main energy source and provide energy remotely. It could purify the ring and provide ammunition support. Thea felt that this was a good idea. The 7 Lantern Corps had enough mid-range and low-range combat power, but they were completely lacking in high-end combat power. It would be difficult for her to deal with the anti-supervisor and the evil Sia by herself, so she had to find a helper. After searching the multiverse for 2 days, she found the spirit. She went straight to the point and asked to destroy the eclipse. The spirit looked at her for a long time before saying, "Okay." Thea almost fell. "Okay. I'm here to ask you to be my fighter. Why are you acting dumb?" Now that she had the confidence, she would not be able to win if they really fought, but the gap was not as big as before. "Are you willing to be my host? I can increase your power infinitely." The spirit was silent for a long time before suddenly saying this. Thea was stunned. She actually thought about it. She had to admit that this was a very tempting offer. The spirit was limited by the strength of its host. The stronger the host, the more power it could unleash. If it chose Thea, who was half a level lower than it, as a host, it would be invincible. That would be practically invincible in the world. Their strengths were not added together, but multiplied together. By then, Darkside and the Eclipse would not be a match at all. Thea's eyes were full of splendor. If she could merge with the spirit, she would not be afraid of Lucifer, the Son of God. Unfortunately, the power did not belong to her. It belonged to God. Xia didn't have much ambition. She wouldn't stand on the road and shout, "Heaven doesn't cover my eyes, earth doesn't bury my heart." She just wanted to be herself. The road ahead was vast, but it was not a dead end. There was no need to walk the path of God. She sighed, her eyes full of regret. "I'm sorry, I just want to be myself. Let's talk about the heavenly eclipse." Ghost was still expressionless. He seemed to know that she would refuse, so he quickly changed the topic to Xianxia. "How are you going to deal with him?" Thea really wanted to say, "You go up and fight while I take advantage of you from behind." However, she also knew that this was not appropriate. The spirit boss just didn't want to talk nonsense. She wasn't stupid. She had done a lot of homework in advance, but she still wanted to know what kind of existence the heavenly eclipse was. "Does he have any weaknesses?" "Xianxia is the vengeful spirit of God. He is my predecessor. In his current state, he cannot use his full strength." Seeing that Ghost was about to reveal something, Missy immediately asked, "Why?" "His true body is still sealed in the heart of darkness." "Who sealed it?" "God." Thea was instantly speechless. However, she also cursed in her heart. The boss was very powerful, but his sealing skills were probably not up to standard. The seal was so weak. How could this guy escape? Ghost continued, "The heavenly eclipse will invade the negative emotions of life. You have to be prepared." Thea expressed that this was not a problem. Heroes were all strong-willed. They ate, slept, and fought against negative emotions every day. If the heavenly eclipse only had this ability, he would not be far from death. "Is the heart of darkness still there? Can we reseal it?" Missy was too lazy to gnaw on a hard bone. This was not a game. There was no drop from the first kill. It was dangerous and tiring. She really did not want to fight. If they could reseal it, it would be much easier. However, she also knew that it was not that easy. Sure enough, Ghost spoke again. "The heart of darkness is the heavenly eclipse. They are already one." Thea frowned. Did this guy mean that the seal would not work? The heavenly eclipse was sealed in the stone by Boss God. He could not escape, so he used a stupid method to turn the stone into a part of himself. She had to admit that this guy was very smart. What is the heart of darkness made of? Is there more in the universe? She continued to ask. How big of a deal is it? If it corrodes the small stone, we will find a bigger stone to seal it in. We will seal both the heavenly eclipse and the small stone together. If he continues to corrode, we'll just have to find an even bigger rock. We will have enough stones. Let's see who can outlast the other. Ghost's eyes were filled with uncertainty. The heart of darkness is a supreme creation. It will not be left in this world. I advise you to give up on this plan. As long as it is separated from the host and no life forms come into contact with it, it will be fine. Thea had reservations about his words. If it was really a special stone, how could it be corroded from the inside by the heavenly eclipse? Putting herself in his shoes, God was so busy. He probably did not care about the heavenly eclipse. He casually took a stone and sealed it. Done. Done. Ghost's plan was not a plan at all. Just separate the heavenly eclipse from the host and bury the heart of darkness in a hole. That was it. Whoever picked up the heart of darkness in the future would be unlucky. All the heroes gathered again and summoned great god Xia again. They formed a team and started fighting again. Fight every century until the end of the world. It had to be said that this cycle was too boring. She asked Ghost a few more questions, but he did not provide much information. However, Thea could tell that this guy had been fighting the heavenly eclipse for countless years. He won more than he lost. Ghost was very confident in the battle between the previous and the current. Thea felt that he had too few opponents of the same level. He had nothing better to do. After 100 years, he would turn a blind eye and let the heavenly eclipse possess him. After that, he would have his fun. She was relieved to leave the heavenly eclipse to Ghost. However, she estimated that the anti-supervisor would appear at the critical moment, so she had to find a helper. Parallel universe. According to the non-famous division, this should be Earth 10, which could also be called Earth X. Because Karl Air landed in Czechoslovakia, Germany won World War II, and history changed beyond recognition. However, in the mother box of the new gods, this was not the division. They had their own way of naming. Countless apocalypse demons descended on this universe. Because they were afraid of a certain big boss from Earth, they went around Earth and went far away. Pooh! The Great Plains wolf killed the resistance with an axe. He wiped the blood splattered on his face and enjoyed the enemy's hateful gaze. This was not because he was despicable. If he did not get scolded every day, he would feel uncomfortable. It was because the divine position required him to do so. Create hatred and absorb hatred. Hatred was the source of the Great Plains wolf's power. Chapter 954. The battle on Earth, the battle on the Apocalypse Star, the battle in Hell, and so on had caused the Wasteland Wolf's divine power to reach rock bottom. In order not to drag Nephew Gu down, or to prove that he was still useful, he seized every minute to stir up trouble. The more hatred he accumulated, the faster he recovered. The continuous battles gave him a vague understanding. He seemed to have touched the position of the god of fear very vaguely. In order to become stronger, he waved his big axe vigorously. He didn't need the help of the soldiers. He killed the people who resisted with his axe, leaving corpses everywhere and blood flowing like a river. He wiped the blood off his face. The bloody slaughter was very satisfying. It cleared his mind and restored his confidence. Apart from those cheats, he was still the wasteland wolf who dominated the world. He bent his knees slightly and held his axe with one hand. He clenched his other hand into a fist and punched his chest. He howled to vent his frustrations. Ah! Cough, cough. Halfway through his shout, he saw a portal open beside him. A beautiful goddess dressed in black appeared beside him, looking at him curiously with her spirited eyes, as if he was a retard. The wasteland wolf felt his breath catch in his throat. He almost vomited blood. He wanted to turn around and curse, or even fight, but he didn't dare. He could only stay on guard with an ugly expression. By the way, are you practicing martial arts here? Theo looked at the corpses on the ground that the wasteland wolf chopped up like melons. These creatures were hairy and looked like spiders on Earth. However, they had 4 legs, long fangs, and hairy legs. They had nothing to do with beauty. She pursed her lips. With such ugly looks, the heroes on Earth probably wouldn't come here to seek justice. This world still cared about appearances. I have something to discuss with Darkseid. Help me ask him out. She sounded like she was talking about something trivial. The wasteland wolf didn't dare to agree on his boss's behalf, but he couldn't refuse. He could only say that he could pass the message. This was considered safe. Whether Darkseid agreed or not, she couldn't eat him. He wanted to know more. The goddess of death was willing to work with the evil lord. There must be a huge benefit behind this. Seeing that Thea didn't show any hostility, he quickly thought about it. He wanted to know more. What do you want to talk about? He asked in a strict manner. The anti-life equation. Thea's words were shocking. As the oldest new deity, the wasteland wolf's strength was a bit weak, but his knowledge was not ordinary. If it was a great warlock, the kindly grandmother and the others most likely wouldn't know what the anti-life equation was, but he knew. You actually know about this. Do you know where it is? He asked anxiously. Thea smiled faintly. Why? Do you want to snatch it too? Her words were vague, but the meaning behind them was the same. You're not worthy. The anti-life equation is also very useful to you, right? Why don't you keep it for yourself? The Great Plains wolf put himself in his shoes. If he knew this news, he would definitely snatch it without a second thought. Firstly, that thing is too dangerous. Secondly, it's too dark and doesn't fit my path. Xia was telling the truth. She really did not want to touch the anti-life equation. This was an ultimate power of destruction extracted from the depths of the anti-universe. If her death was mixed with it, then an earth-shattering dark demon that could destroy the multiverse would definitely rise. She had a clear understanding of what kind of power she could and could not take. She had already walked far enough down the path of darkness. If she was given the anti-life equation, her path would be dark all the way. In order not to lose herself, it was better to take back some of it. Her goal was to obtain the anti-life equation that was filled with positive energy. It was not easy to obtain the anti-life equation. Even if she obtained it, Darkseid was not compatible with it. The slightest mistake could lead to a tragedy. She would just let Uncle Da study it. I know Darkseid is worried. Tell him we can meet in hell. Thea teleported away after she finished speaking. After learning this earth-shattering news that could change the balance of power in the multiverse, the Great Plains wolf could not be bothered to kill anyone. He excitedly opened the mother box and returned to Revelation Star. He was quite clear about his position, so he told Darkseid everything that had happened without missing a single word. The anti-life equation. Darkseid valued this news more than the Great Plains wolf expected. The evil lord revealed a thoughtful expression in front of his subordinate. Just like Thea, Darkseid had no room for improvement. He studied the experiences of his predecessors and compared them in an attempt to find his own path of development. In the original timeline, Darkseid had his eyes on the god of death, but he had not made any progress. In the end, he gritted his teeth and plotted to kill himself so that he could cultivate again and be resurrected. However, he had not made any progress. In this timeline, he would not do such a thing again. He did not have many choices, and the anti-life equation had always been at the top of his list. However, ordinary people had never heard of such a creation of the laws of the universe. There was also no forum specially designed for the big shots for them to communicate and consult, chat, and exchange what they needed. A few of the big shots were holed up in their own places. Who knew who had the life-reversing equation? Unless Darkseid was strong enough to subdue all 8 regions in the god's domain. Of course, this was impossible. Other things aside, he could not even defeat the supreme ruler of hell, Lucifer. He was no match for him. For the sake of the anti-life equation, he was prepared to attend the meeting. Your Majesty, the goddess thinks that the equation is very dangerous. Shouldn't you be more careful? The Great Plains wolf had calmed down. He looked at the anti-life equation with caution. He felt that his boss was a little reckless. Was power more important than life? Darkseid waved his hand, indicating that there was no need to say more. Of course, he knew the danger. The two paths were completely different. The anti-life equation was suitable for the anti-watchers, so it was not suitable for him. However, he had no choice but to take a look at it first. However, there was no need to discuss this with his subordinates. He sent the Great Plains wolf to be the vanguard. He did not dare to go to a place like hell with his main body. Thea probably did not dare to go there either. Choosing to meet here was very suitable. Even if they did not come to an agreement, they would not fight. The boss of Hell was too strong. The Great Plains wolf rushed to Hell alone. This was an unofficial meeting between the bosses of Hell and the Apocalypse Star, so they still had to keep it a secret. The aura of Hell was chaotic, and the air was extremely hot. Even a new god like the Great Plains wolf felt uncomfortable here. According to their previous agreement, he crushed a talisman to inform the other party that he had arrived. Not long after, the blood-red portal opened, and an extremely gorgeous female demon walked out while stroking her hair coquettishly. Chapter 955. The female demon was extremely beautiful. She sized up the wasteland wolf playfully, her gaze sweeping across his chest and arm muscles. She giggled and said, "Welcome to Hell, Commander of the Apocalypse Star. I am Micanthus, the Lord of the City of the Dead." The wasteland wolf couldn't help but take another look. She had a name and a territory. This was a great demon. She didn't seem very strong. Her thin waist wasn't even as thick as his arm. However, he didn't underestimate the female demon. When it came to scheming, no one would dare to say they were the best. Moreover, this was Hell. With the blessing of Hell's will, one's combat power would increase exponentially. One couldn't just look at the surface. He said in a muffled voice, "Where are we meeting? Are you from the goddess of death?" Micanthus didn't admit or deny it. He tacitly agreed. The underworld was starting to add sand to Hell. The wasteland wolf was impressed by the beautiful lady's ability to scheme. The Apocalypse Star was not afraid of Hell, but even the villains were divided into factions. Demons were greedy and could not be killed. Darkseid had once publicly declared that he hated demons, especially those who were ranked at the top of the Apocalypse Star. The meeting place isn't far from here. It's the territory of the eldest son of the three palaces, the Black Gold Flame Emissary, Belial. Micanthus opened another portal. The wasteland wolf checked that there were no problems and walked in as well. The meeting place wasn't big. It was just a small palace. Although the underworld and the three palaces had fought, the demons only cared about benefits. After a few negotiations, they had formed a tacit understanding with the eldest son of the three palaces. It was very cliché to help the older brother deal with the younger brother. Micanthus was now the channel between the two sides. He was doing well with money and power. The wasteland wolf checked the meeting place. There were no problems, no ambushes, no traps. Actually, there was nothing to be afraid of even if there was an ambush. The boss would definitely come with a projection. If a projection was destroyed, it wouldn't affect the main body at all. As for himself, the wasteland wolf knew very well that Thea wouldn't spend so much effort to trick him. He didn't have that status. The wasteland wolf and Micanthus sent out signals at the same time. In less than 10 minutes, Thea and Darkseid's projections appeared in the room. Like a servant, Micanthus bowed and withdrew, causing Darkseid to give him a second look. This was a great demon that had been transformed from a human. His combat power was ordinary, but the aura of Hell was not weak. This meant that he was favored by the will of Hell. The evil lord quickly retracted his gaze. His voice was as heavy as a giant hammer, and his words were like thunder. Who has the anti-life equation? Anti-watcher. Where is the anti-monitor? Most likely in the antimatter universe. You want to attack the antimatter universe? Their conversation was concise and comprehensive, with questions and answers, testing each other's bottom line. For example, Darkseid knew that Sia did know about the anti-life equation and did not lie to him. No matter what the final result was, at least this trip was not in vain. Thea had also confirmed Darkseid's desire for the anti-life equation, to the point that he was determined to get it. Now, the two of them had a basis for cooperation. The anti-watcher has just revived, Darkseid nodded. I saw your battle in the timeline. Was that when you sensed the anti-life equation? Thea did not expect him to be able to fill in the blanks on his own. She immediately admitted it. Yes, it was then. That power that can destroy everything is really terrifying. We still have a chance now. The anti-monitor is very weak. If he destroys a few more parallel universes, his strength will change drastically. By then, we won't be his match at all. The other party had something they needed. Before he recovered his strength, they could kill him together and happily split the spoils. This was something that Darkseid did not feel pressured at all. However, he wanted to know what role Thea played in this matter. What could she gain by putting in so much effort? Would she be prepared to benefit from the fight between the Snipe and the Clam? What can you gain from this? Not only did he want to know, but he also asked. Thea's expression was calm. She reached out and snapped her fingers. There was a flash of light, and the image of a woman appeared. Who was this? Darkseid took a closer look and realized that this was Thea's counterpart. He despised her in his heart. She was a new god that had ascended from the material world. She actually had a counterpart. He did not have such trouble. There was only one Darkseid in the entire universe. But Darkseid's eyes could look directly at the source of matter. That was the Omega effect. He used a little of the Omega effect to trace the source and immediately found something strange. The woman in the image was very powerful. She was so strong that he felt a little uneasy. Could he beat her? Was the counterpart of the goddess of death this powerful? This was too illogical. Was she the daughter of the creator? Darkseid thought too much when he thought about how Thea had reached her current level in just a few years. Could it be that they were essentially the same entity, a higher-level being who had separated for some reason? Now, she wanted to regain the lost part of her origin. Was that why she was not interested in the anti-life equation? The more he thought about it, the more it made sense. In fact, the Great Plains wolf was not the only one who was unhappy. Darkseid was also under great pressure. At the rate Thea was leveling up, it would only take a few years for her to catch up to him. This was a huge blow to Darkseid's confidence. If she had descended from a higher plane, then everything would make sense. It was not inconceivable for a powerful being to experience life. As for whether she had gone too far or was part of the game, Darkseid did not want to know. Thea did not know what Darkseid was thinking. She waited quietly for the result. You want to get rid of your counterpart, and I'll deal with the anti-watcher. Is that right? Darkseid wanted to confirm. The two of them would fight on their own without interfering with each other. This would prevent the other from attacking, and it would be easier to collect the spoils after the battle. This was the ideal situation. That's right. As long as the anti-watcher appears, he'll be yours. Of course, if you can't beat him, I can help, but you'll need to increase your leverage. What if he runs away? Darkseid was not sure how confident he was in defeating the anti-watcher. Considering his current pitiful state, he was still confident. However, if the anti-watcher ran away, it would be troublesome. Darkseid's large body showed that he was not good at speed. At least, he was not good at speed among those of the same level. I can stabilize time and space. He won't be able to run away. Thea felt that she had to do something while watching the two bad guys fight to the death. This mission of stabilizing time and space was not bad, so she immediately took it on herself. As for the evil world's consciousness, it had little influence on Darkseid and the anti-watcher. Besides, it was hard to say whether Darkseid or the anti-watcher was more evil. Chapter 956. Darkseid felt that Thea's task was too easy and unfair to him, but he suppressed his displeasure when he thought about the importance of the anti-life equation. Mage-type gods were rare, especially those like Thea. Her understanding of space and time was far greater than Darkseid's. If she could seal the space, she would definitely be able to prevent him from escaping. If she turned hostile after the battle and refused to let him leave, Darkseid was not worried at all. He was strong enough to break through all space barriers. If worse came to worst, he could flip a table and shatter a planet. He had no qualms about doing so. There was definitely a risk, and it was not a small one. However, after thinking about it for a long time, he felt that it was not a big problem. He nodded and agreed. Okay, I agree. After discussing the details of the cooperation, the two gods disappeared from Hell. There were too many powerful beings in Hell, so it was best to stay away from them. Sky Eclipse was left to the Ghost, Anti-Surveillance was left to Darkseid, and the rest had their own opponents. As for the terrifying Luther from Earth 3, he was a retard and was not worth the effort. After counting the enemies and matching them up, she found that the arrangement was very good. The young lady basically had nothing to do in this battle. At most, she would help out when someone was in danger. However, she did not slack off. It was always right to be prepared. She had discovered a problem when she fought First Light the last time. Her instant death attack lacked a surprise attack. Unlike the Black Death Emperor, who could easily wipe out a large number of enemies, she needed to prepare a few seconds in advance. This problem was not obvious when dealing with low-level enemies, but it was very frustrating when dealing with enemies of the same level. They were not blind, so they could always dodge. No matter how powerful an instant death attack was, it was useless if it could not hit the enemy. She needed a way to kill the enemy without drawing her sword. Improving one's level was the most effective way, but unfortunately, she did not have the time. Her foundation was already weak, and she lacked further enlightenment. This path was useless. Her mind wandered, and she quickly came up with a solution that was not a solution. After returning to Hell, she mobilized a large amount of human and material resources to create a scabbard in the place where the aura of death was the thickest. She had originally planned to make a scabbard where she could place the night sky sword to absorb the aura of death. Then, she could take it out and kill the enemy with one strike. Unfortunately, it did not match her style. Her long sleeves were fluttering in the wind, and she was carrying a sword sheath on her back. It was very eye-catching and beautiful. Now that she was carrying a cloak and a long robe, it was neither fish nor fowl. She could only compress it further and turn it into a sword sheath. Their effects were about the same, but the only problem was their durability. The death energy provided by the sword sheath might be able to launch 3 sure-kill attacks, but the scabbard could only provide 2. However, she reckoned that this should be enough. If she couldn't kill an enemy with 2 strikes, she wouldn't be able to kill him with 3 strikes either. The ghost didn't say what kind of material was suitable to seal the heavenly erosion. Thea found a few huge stones from the underworld that looked abnormally sturdy. They were also resistant to high pressure, corrosion, and magic. She kept them in her space as backup. Maybe one of them would come in handy. His daily research on the two-dimensional world was still fruitless. His spiritual feelers entered that world, and then what happened? Thea didn't know what to do either. She didn't have anyone to refer to, and it was a very painful thing to think about. In order not to affect Diana's future development, she did not tell her lover and could only think about it on her own. In the end, she couldn't figure it out. She decided to find someone to ask. Lucifer was impossible. This son of God was a god in his own world. He wouldn't come out even if the universe exploded. Big Brother Fate was strong enough, but this guy was always hiding from her. The remaining Watchers and Anti-Watchers seemed to be immeasurably powerful, but they were actually a bunch of high-level puppets. Thea didn't care about them at all. The Anti-Watchers aside, the Watchers seemed to be able to destroy the universe and record everything that happened in it. However, they were inseparable from the universe and were one. As long as the universe existed, the individual Watcher would exist. When the universe perished, so would the Watcher. When the universe evolved into the age of science and technology, the Watcher would be full of sci-fi vibes. If the universe evolved to the extreme of cold weapons, the Watcher would be an armored giant. Thea even felt that they didn't have the concept of self. They were completely different from her and Darkseid, who had their own emotions. They were like living programs. She would rather die than walk down this path. After eliminating those who had the ability to create the universe but ignored her, she only had one person left in her mind that she could ask. This person didn't live far away, but she hadn't made up her mind to contact him. It wasn't heaven or hell, and it wasn't some strange place. The person she was looking for was on Earth, in the metropolis. This place was only one stop away from the Daily Planet. It was the first choice for the city's poor. The security was good, and the rent was cheap. Other than the fact that the population was a little mixed, there was basically nothing wrong with it. When Superman first came to the metropolis, he lived here for a long time. The rent wasn't expensive, and it was close to the newspaper office. He only moved out after he got married to Louise, a fair, rich, and beautiful woman. Thea wasn't looking for him today, nor was she looking for something he left behind. She was looking for Superman's former neighbor, an old woman. When she found her, the old woman was drying clothes on the rooftop. Her hair was white, and her face was full of wrinkles. She wore a green t-shirt that was a little loose and didn't fit her body well. When the old woman turned around and saw Thea, she was shocked. Even if she didn't dress up, Thea's clothes were still of the best quality. Although this area wasn't considered a slum, no one would wear such expensive clothes. Do you need something from me? The old woman said hesitantly. Thea looked at her from head to toe and seemed to be relieved. I know you, the princess of the fifth dimension. Don't you have any power now? After her biggest secret was exposed, the old woman was shocked at first. Then, she became calm as if she had accepted her fate. She chuckled as if she was mocking herself. She wiped her hands with a towel. Since the other party knew her true identity, she was not afraid. She continued to hang the clothes as usual and was busy for half an hour. Thea didn't say anything. Her eyes were constantly observing the old woman, not letting go of any of her small movements. Don't look, young lady. Or according to your people here, you're a god or something. I'm just an old woman now. I don't have the power you're worried about, the old woman said bitterly. Do you want to have a drink, young lady? The old woman took out a bottle of beer from the pile of clothes and invited her. Thea wouldn't drink her food no matter how low her guard was. She shook her head and refused. Chapter 957. The old woman shook her head as if nothing had happened. She sat at the side tiredly, tilted her head, and started drinking. Thea casually summoned a chair and sat opposite her. The distance between them was neither too far nor too close. She still maintained her vigilance and did not let her guard down. Seeing her casually pull a chair out of the void, the old woman's eyes lit up. You're such a busy person. Why are you looking for me? I want to know how to upgrade a two-dimensional world to a three-dimensional world. She answered casually, as if she was discussing family matters with the old woman. Knowledge is priceless. Besides, I feel that you're completely different from us. The old woman said with uncertainty. I'm sorry. I'm just an ordinary person in this world. I'm afraid I can't help you. If you still have your power, can you upgrade a two-dimensional world at will? Of course. Then how did you do it? I don't know. After talking for a long time, Thea was a little depressed. The old woman's attitude was sincere. She chose to avoid some questions, but she basically did not lie. Perhaps she was not good at lying, or perhaps the pride of a fifth-dimensional person made her disdain to lie. I really don't know how to describe this process in your language. The old woman held it in for a long time as if she was constipated. She could not think of a word even after racking her brains. The old woman was not a top student. Her intelligence was average. Even her English sounded like a country bumpkin. Forget about French or Chinese, she did not know how to speak at all. The vocabulary of the English language was too small. Xia was confused by the few strange words that were repeated over and over again. I'll let you see my memories. Maybe it will help you, the old woman said. Thea was silent for a long time. She could not accept this gift without a reason. This was related to her bottom line, the trade deity position, and even karma. She had to ask clearly. What do I need to do? The old woman was also silent for a few minutes. You need to hear my story. Damn. Thea cursed silently. Listening to her story was tantamount to karma. Of course, according to the logic of the fifth-dimensional people, she had entered the story of the fifth-dimensional princess. She was not the silly Superman from the original space-time. For the sake of a two-dimensional world, should he get involved in this mess? She asked tentatively, how was your power compared to mine when you still had it? The old woman glanced at Thea. The disdain in her eyes was concealed, but Thea could still see it. You're thinking too much. To us, the main character of the story is someone else. Everything has already happened and is destined. You're just a dispensable participant. The old woman's words were very vague, but Thea understood. As long as he was not the main character, it was fine. As for whether the main character was Superman or not, she did not care. My name is a bit long for you, and it doesn't mean much in your language. My name is Giz Pietrini. Before she could finish her sentence, the entire world began to shake. Ordinary people would not notice it, but Thea noticed it immediately. She hurriedly waved her hand to block out the sound in this world. When she realized that it was not sound, she cut off the connection between this world and space. Only then did the tremors subside. Amazing! She glanced at the old woman. She was so powerful even before she finished her name. The fifth-dimensional people were indeed worthy of their reputation. The old woman was a little dejected. Well, the name doesn't mean much here. For the sake of convenience, you should call me Madam Ni. After all, I'm an old woman. Thea readily followed her advice. Madam Ni, please continue. The fifth-dimensional world is beyond your imagination. A long time ago, it was a place that was infinitely close to the past and could never reach the future. It was far away, yet close at the same time. The old woman stood up. Her withered body spoke and gestured like a fool, but Thea knew that she was choosing her words carefully. There was a fifth-dimensional kingdom full of fantasy and wonder called Raf. I won't say the full name of the kingdom. The full name of the kingdom is meaningless to you. The ruler of the kingdom, Bulepe Kizi, has been depressed ever since his queen passed away. Ever since the queen passed away, there was nothing that could brighten his mood. Because of his sadness, the entire palace, as well as Raf, was shrouded in blue-black gloom. All the royal family and subjects felt the king's sadness. Thea's mind was filled with the image of a great demon king baring his fangs and brandishing his claws about to devour people. Madame Ni recalled for a moment and continued. All his subjects gathered all the rare treasures in the kingdom and offered them to him. His most beloved daughter talked to him every day, but none of them could make him smile again. This included his court magician, Lord Venedeket. He conjured up rigid procedures, dull concepts, noisy rules, and pale examples. All of these made the king sleepy. Thea pursed her lips and did not say anything. This old woman's story was not objective at all. This so-called court magician was described as worthless by her. It was obvious that there was a personal factor at play. Until one day, the old woman's eyes were filled with vigor. A young man came to the palace. Although he was dressed shabbily, he had an extraordinary presence. His charming smile seemed to be able to make the stars blink. Thea rolled her beautiful eyes. Sure enough, the story developed as she expected. The old woman's eyes were intoxicated as she said, "The charming young man is guaranteed to make the king laugh. The court magician, Windicott Wilkes, is very disdainful." "What is that young man's name?" Thea asked. "Thea, you can think about it." The old woman's affectionate voice gave Thea goosebumps. If he remembered correctly, this guy was the #1 troublemaker in the DC universe. The young mistress insincerely praised a few words like good name and so on. The old woman continued, "The enigmatic Pietrico did not play with those traditional tricks. He took off his hat and pulled out a projection of the universe, a curled-up multiverse. He was like an energetic, tireless elf. He played those people in the universe in circles and finally welcomed the king's laughter." Thea knew very well that this so-called amusing king was the story of the troublemaker and Superman. Superman was turned into a boss in a dungeon, and the troublemaker's various strange ideas and Superman's quick-witted responses. From a bystander's point of view, this story was indeed quite amusing. "Then you two fell in love with Mr. Venedeket. Thea felt that the old woman's taste was quite good if she could fall in love with a super joker. Chapter 958. Yes, our love spread throughout the kingdom and finally aroused the wrath of the jealous. The court magician, Windicott Will. He launched a desperate revenge and stole the kingdom's divine weapon, the fantasy machine, the nihility treasure robe, and the multi-trillion blade spear. Madame Nee's eyes glowed fiercely, her hands spread out like chicken claws, as if she wanted to strangle the court magician. He put on the nihility treasure robe and sneaked into the palace, wanting to kill Pietrico of the Enigma. However, fate played a trick on him. He saw the bowler hat that Pietrico of the Enigma often wore, so he raised the multi-trillion blade spear and stabbed it. I didn't expect that the one wearing the bowler hat that day was His Majesty the King. Even the mighty king couldn't withstand the attack of the multi-billion blade spear. However, the huge reaction force still destroyed the spear and shattered the nihility treasure robe and one of Windicott arms. The whole world roared because of the death of the king. Pietrico of the Enigma told me to run away and stay behind to deal with the pursuers. I escaped, tore through the dimension, and came here. In this land of exile, I lost my power and became immortal, quietly and slowly waiting for the end of my life. Thea showed a regretful expression, as if sympathizing with the tragic experience of a pair of lovers. She did not delve into whether the story was biased, nor did she ask about the fate of the people in the story. Fate was fate, and the fifth dimension was the fifth dimension. She only wanted some high-level knowledge to broaden her horizons. For the fifth dimension people, time was between existence and non-existence. The story of Superman and the troublemaker had not happened to Superman and Thea, but from the perspective of the fifth dimension people, it was actually something that happened many years ago. Thea touched Madame Nee's forehead and began to read her memories. Words could not be described, and memories could not be faked. They could use their abilities freely, just like breathing and drinking water, which was very useful for Thea. A huge and messy fantasy rushed into her mind. There was no rationality, no logic, and the absurd ravings formed one picture after another. This was a completely different way of thinking, completely different from reality. It took her 10 minutes to accept everything. The life of this fifth-dimensional princess was simple. Living in the fifth-dimensional world was simple, and being an earthling was even simpler. In terms of experience, she was no match for Haruba, an old turtle who had lived for billions of years, but her memory was hundreds of times better than the Guardians. Thea was like using a supercomputer on Earth to read an extraterrestrial supercomputer. You couldn't say that she was slow, but she was very uncoordinated. Fortunately, her state was indeed high enough. She read it completely and even double-checked it. Seeing that she did not miss anything, she then bid farewell to Madame N.I. She had to go back and think carefully. She did not go to the White House or the underworld. Instead, she went to the Endless Family's base. With fate at the front, this was the safest place in the world. After all, the DC universe was a 10th-dimensional world. Although the 5th-dimensional people sounded powerful, they were nothing in front of fate. Madame Ni had the most images of the troublemaker in her memory, and Thea read this part first. The results were reasonable. The troublemaker's strength did not exceed her expectations by much. It was like in those old comics, where the troublemaker could turn ghosts into pictures and kill the anti-spy with a snap of his fingers. Thea estimated that if the troublemaker were to enter the multiverse, he would be at the level of the 3 palace demons. This strength was stronger than Thea and Darkseid, but not to the extent that it was incomprehensible. The troublemaker's content was sealed, and she could read it slowly when she had time. She only needed to read Madame Ni's description of the 5th-dimensional world. Thea had long passed the level of following the crowd. She had her own judgment and would not blindly believe what others said was the truth. In this day and age, even the Supreme could make mistakes, let alone this 5th-dimensional princess. Looking at how she was now hanging out on the rooftop to dry clothes and drink beer, and how miserable she was, it was clear that she was far from being omniscient and omnipotent. The old woman's theory could only be used as a reference. There was no need to learn everything. The goddess of death had her own pride. Madame Ni believed that the 5th-dimensional world was the 5th-dimensional world, and reality was the 3rd-dimensional world. The 3rd-dimensional world should be the 4th-dimensional world. It was a mixed world, and could not be simply described as the 3rd-dimensional world. The troublemaker was a poor guy in the 5th-dimensional world, but in the 4th-dimensional world, he was a god. Similarly, when Thea ascended to the 4th-dimensional world, she was also a god in time. Although the troublemaker was a max-level character in the 4th-dimensional world, and she had ascended from the lower world, and there was a difference in strength, they were still on the same level. Some people said that the 5th-dimensional world was the mind, but this point of view was only slightly related. In her opinion, it was more appropriate to say that it was a fantasy world. Just like the Martian hunter, his ability was very idealistic. If he felt that he could do it, then he could do it. If he could not, then he could. Many mages and psychics also had the ability to turn illusions into reality. Where did this ability come from? Why did it appear out of thin air? Thea felt that these abilities more or less borrowed a trace of the power of the 5th-dimensional world. The 5th-dimensional world was very close to normal people. Madame Ni said that it was far away but close at hand. This was very accurate. The 5th-dimensional world could not be seen or touched by normal people, but it was there and had never left. Everyone had time and the ability to think. A few people could even extract power from their thoughts. Therefore, the 3rd-dimensional world was made up of 1-dimensional points and lines, 2-dimensional planes, 3-dimensional space, 4-dimensional time, 5-dimensional thoughts, 6-dimensional, 7-dimensional, and all the way to the 10th-dimensional world. These invisible and unknown things were piled up together like a big box over a small box. When an individual reached the 10th-dimensional world, they would be considered to have reached the peak of this world. Thea would not take that path. Different paths lead to the same destination. The essence of power was the same. The only difference was the method and process of obtaining it. Carefully sifting through Madame Ni's memories, just like how not everyone in the 5th-dimensional world was a scientist, there were also unreliable people in the 5th-dimensional world. Milady felt that this princess was most likely a slacker in the 5th-dimensional world, the kind that only thought about young men and did not study hard. She spent a lot of effort to interpret many of the viewpoints in her own way, only to find that they were all wrong. One had to know that she was now a multiverse-level character. The veil of the world had been lifted to a corner for her. Theories that contradicted her basic understanding had a 99% chance of being wrong. However, she could not completely deny it. She could only decipher and ponder at the same time. She would keep the correct ones and look at them carefully later. Chapter 959. As for those that were completely contrary to her own understanding, she also noted them down. She was prepared to look at them from different angles in the future. Perhaps she would have some new ideas after experiencing more and improving her realm. The memories of the fifth-dimensional princess were completely filtered and deciphered. She switched to her own understanding and soon found the method to upgrade from 2 to 3 dimensions. For the fifth-dimensional people, this was extremely simple. No wonder Madame and I couldn't explain it clearly. It was too simple. To them, it was as casual as drinking water and eating. In reality, who could explain the process of drinking water, from the beginning of swallowing to the complete digestion and absorption, the steps the water went through, the specific effects, and which organs were used? Not many people could say it correctly because it was a natural thing. It was the same for the fifth-dimensional people. They had never thought about the specific steps to break it down. At least, this fifth-dimensional princess who was blinded by love had never thought about it. Xia couldn't just copy other people's talents. She needed to break down every step and study it bit by bit. Fortunately, she had a scientific spirit and had done many scientific experiments in the past few years. If it was someone like Diana, who was ignorant of science, she would be dumbfounded. She was fine. She had enough scientific literacy and personal thinking to support her research. After combing through all her memories twice, she found that there were no more problems. She directly returned to the underworld. The endless family was the starting point of time, not a place for seclusion. If she stayed for too long, she was afraid that Big Brother Fate would throw her out. She broke it down and studied it. When she found that she couldn't fully understand the results, she continued to break it down. During this period, she had been frantically researching. She wanted to completely break down the fifth-dimensional people's drinking and breathing instincts to the extent that she could use them. It wasn't until Diana called her that she knew that Batman and the others had completed the reverse teleportation. "What are you researching?" The two of them were changing clothes at home. Diana saw that her figure was ethereal and her temperament was agile. She had an illusory feeling, as if she could leave the material world at any time. Diana was a little worried. Thea was also a little helpless. She had researched for half a month. This job was more troublesome than she had imagined. She focused on research and slowly showed signs of ascending to the fourth dimension. However, she was a god. While her life was constant, it also meant that her life form was very stubborn. The ability to turn a normal person into a four-dimensional life form could not change her nature. He used permanence to stabilize himself in his current state and briefly explained the situation. Diana didn't know much about the fourth and fifth dimensions, but when she heard Thea talk about building a parallel universe in broad terms, she wasn't too surprised. From her perspective, her lover was very good at tormenting, in various senses. It was normal for him to do something earth-shattering. The two of them arrived at the Hall of Justice. Originally, the Watchtower Space Base was the most suitable place to conduct such secretive activities, but when they found out that the advance party was going to head to Earth-3 today, not only the Righteous Alliance, but the other factions also sent representatives to observe. For example, Martian Hunter, who had always been away from the main alliance, Luther, who had brought his own rations, the young Titan Red Robin Tim, the Dark Justice League's Madame Xanadu, and the Rogue Gang's Captain Han all rushed to the scene. The remaining President Moira, the Vice President, the Speaker of the Congress, General Lane, Amanda, Steve, various consultants, experts, and a bunch of other people gathered together. They wanted to witness this with their own eyes and see what the other parallel universe was like. That's right, Batman was very awesome. He had played tricks with a legendary device. Originally, the evil old butler's golden skull was a locator. It opened the channel and was done with a bang. Now, it had been magically modified with a lot of advanced technology from Luther and Batman. It could transmit sound and images across dimensions, making it like a live broadcast. The original three-man team of Nightwing, Black Canary, and Atom Man now had a new member. Baldy Luther was also going. What he was going to do was very important. It couldn't even be done without him. For the sake of concealment, the first teleportation couldn't use too much energy, and the request was that they bring less stuff. The teleportation device couldn't be completed on this side. If it was activated on the other side, they would have to start from scratch on the other side. Building a teleportation channel on Earth 3 wasn't the job of Nightwing and Black Canary, who were good at fighting. Their specializations were different, and Atom Man wasn't as knowledgeable as Luther. There would be some differences in the laws of physics between the two worlds. The most important thing was that they needed to report to the plane at all times. This was no longer a matter of the Righteous Alliance, but a national matter. Several military staff officers had been stationed in the Hall of Justice to revise the follow-up plan after getting first-hand information. This teleportation job could only be done by Luther. After all, Nightwing and the others couldn't show their faces, and they couldn't disguise themselves on Earth 3. They couldn't appear in front of the camera, so they could only bring Luther along for this mission. Nightwing and the others teleported in a small room next door, and everyone in the hall surrounded Luther. His teleportation device was the most complicated. Several nano-level communication devices had to be implanted under the skin, and the coordinates of the landing point were provided by Thea. Guangdong still had a few subordinates on Earth 3. Although their strength was sealed, a few shadow assassins could be the initial support work. Boom, boom, the machine began to roar continuously. Luther enjoyed this kind of attention and didn't feel the danger at all. A huge white light flashed, and he was happily teleported. Why hasn't the image been sent back yet? Moira waited for 3 minutes, but there was nothing on the screen. She couldn't help but ask Thea. The flow of time between the two worlds is different. It should be soon, she answered with certainty. Sure enough, 5 minutes after Luther and the others left, the image finally came back. Nightwing and the others had to disguise themselves as ordinary people and wouldn't appear in front of the camera. As for Atom Man, even if he walked out openly, ordinary people wouldn't be able to see him. With the help of advanced technology, a group of politicians at the scene also saw the image of Earth 3, and even transmitted it to the world's leaders in real time through the Righteous Alliance. The sky here is blood red, the light is very weak, and there are no pedestrians on the street. Luther said carefully, and at the same time, put on a wig. Baldness was still very eye-catching these days. Although he wanted everyone to know him, Luther wasn't stupid. In an environment full of enemies, he still needed to keep a low profile. The scene seemed a little cold. He hugged his shoulders and carefully observed the surroundings. The road was very empty, like a dead city. There were no pedestrians, and naturally, there were no police cars. Occasionally, a car would pass by, but it was full of heavily armed non-government personnel. Looking at their headscarves, clothes, and weapons in their hands, it was obvious how chaotic this place was. Chapter 960. Luther looked up at the sky again and observed for a while. Although the blood-red curtain blocks the whole world, there is still a weak sunlight. The sun here rises in the west and sets in the east, he said with great certainty. Hey, I found a book for you. The sudden voice startled the dignitaries. They knew it was the Atom Man. He could walk in front of the camera without any scruples because no one could see him. Luther picked up the book on the ground. Now everything was unknown. Books were a good way to learn. They had discussed it before. The book was not too thick. It seemed to be an enlightenment book. There were some illustrations. Luther flipped through it casually. But after a few glances, he smiled with a strange and playful smile. He flipped through the book quickly and finished reading it in less than half a minute. He opened the book and let the dignitaries see it clearly. At the same time, he added his own explanation. This is very interesting. This is a children's book. It tells a historical story. The history here is beyond recognition. In this world, the American Columbus discovered the European continent, the American army surrendered to the British Army during the American Revolution, and the actor Lincoln assassinated President John Wilkes Booth. Ha! A sense of absurdity filled everyone's heart. This knowledge was completely contrary to what they knew. Look here. The government here is called the Black Palace. It is built in a place we call the European continent. Haha, I'm dying of laughter. Luther flipped through a page. The building in the picture was the same as the White House, but the color was like it had been burned. The artist drew it very vividly. Thick smoke billowed around the Black Palace. It was full of evil. Look at this. This is the masterpiece of the local artist who called it a national treasure. It looks like a half-human, half-beast thing. Luther flipped through and explained casually. He then showed it to everyone in front of the camera. A blood-red monster that looked like it had been skinned was baring its fangs and brandishing its claws to devour something. The layering of the picture was good, but the content was nauseating. Not only the dignitaries in the Hall of Justice, but even the heroes were not looking too good. This half-human half-beast thing did not have anything to do with justice. Evil had infiltrated all aspects of the place. Luther flipped to the end. In the picture was a man in blue tights and a red cape. The man had his hands on his hips and his eyes were cold as he soared in the sky. Ah, this is our old acquaintance. Let me see his name. Super Ultraman. What a good name. Superman's face was livid, indicating that he was very unhappy with Luther's teasing. Thea covered her mouth and chuckled. Diana glanced at her curiously, but she waved her hand to indicate that it was nothing. Ultraman. Ultraman. It was indeed a good name. A children's book couldn't provide too many clues, so he quickly flipped through it. The general idea was to introduce the history of this place. Superpowers and whatnot were just general descriptions. Luther walked down the street, wearing a hood. He looked around hurriedly as he walked. This was not to say that he was nervous or that his mental fortitude was low. It was because the people here all walked like that. There were only a few passers-by, but their eyes were glowing and they were on high alert. They were afraid of being attacked, but at the same time, they wanted to be the hunters themselves. The roles of predator and food were constantly changing here. The entire world's will was encouraging them to do bad things. The more they did, the greater their influence, and the happier the world's will would be. As long as you want to do something bad, the will of the world will provide you with convenience. If you want to do something good, then it will do everything possible to obstruct you until you become a corpse. In front of the world's political leaders, Luther acted out a method of asking for directions that was very characteristic of Earth. He observed the passers-by on the road and quickly found his target. He was hiding in a dark alley, lying on the ground. His 2 feet were exposed from the shadows, trembling from time to time, as if he was a critically ill patient who was about to lose his life. A thin passerby passed by in front of him. Luther's slight trembling attracted his attention. A simple corpse was worthless. People died here every day, and the things on the corpse would be taken away in 10 minutes. And the guy in front of him was obviously not dead. His leather shoes seemed to be a bit oily. He turned into the street corner, wanting to see what else he could take away from Luther's body. The shoes were not bad, at least they could be exchanged for some money. Just as he was thinking about who to sell them to, Luther, who was determined to be a dying man, suddenly exploded. A syringe was inserted into his vein, and then he dragged him back into the dark like a dead dog. His actions were smooth and without any hesitation. He did not look like a super billionaire at all. Instead, he looked like an experienced street veteran. The people of the Righteous Alliance felt a little uncomfortable watching such a crime happen right under their noses, but they did not say anything. After all, Luther had a sense of propriety and did not kill anyone. Superheroes did not fight back. Batman dominated Gotham, and no one blamed him for it. What's more, for many people, people in parallel universes were not human at all. The interrogation process was boring. Ordinary humans could not resist the effects of the truth-telling potion. The passerby who was captured by Luther quickly told him everything he knew. Historical events were indescribably strange. Many historical figures still existed in history, but the things they did were completely different. Luther's focus was always on the Kryptonians. He asked a lot of questions about them. According to the passerby, the super tyrant here came to Earth 30 years ago. After that, he brought Earth, which was already full of evil, to a new height. He threw money in public just to cause chaos and organized his henchmen to establish a criminal syndicate. He used super hearing to monitor the world and burned the few righteous people to death with heat rays. His methods were extremely cruel, but it shocked the whole world. Crime began to become mainstream. The passerby deliberately mentioned that the super tyrant had an extremely advanced spaceship parked above Earth. The artificial intelligence on the spaceship was monitoring Earth at all times. Will the advance team be in danger? Moira immediately asked. As a charismatic politician, whether she was sincere or not, it had become an instinct to care about her subordinates in danger. Thea had been competing with the two-dimensional world recently. She shook her head to show that she did not know. She also turned to look at Batman, who was the self-proclaimed second spokesperson of the Righteous Alliance. Batman was very calm. With the help of Thea's relationship, the current government and superheroes had the closest and most compatible relationship. He replied calmly, "Don't worry, Mr. President. We have analyzed the difference between humans and the two worlds. Our vibration frequency is different from that of the other side. Unless we are specifically monitoring according to a certain frequency, we will not be discovered." Moira nodded in agreement. They continued to watch the live broadcast. Chapter 961. At this time, Luther was almost done asking Super Overlord about the space monitor. As expected, this was the fortress of solitude of the superhumans in this world. However, the superhumans in this world had always treated it as their home, as a memory of Krypton that stayed at the North Pole. In the other world, Super Overlord directly activated the spaceship and became the monitor of all humans. Passers-by also knew very little information. They only knew the code names of a few bad guys and did not know their real names. However, the Fortress of Solitude belonged to Super Overlord alone. The Syndicate and the others could not enter. Nightingale from Earth 3 had also launched a space base. Unlike the ring-shaped watchtower here, his was square. A day passed quickly. Luther's main task was to build a teleportation circle so that more heroes could enter this universe silently. The task of investigating military information and supercriminals was still left to the 3 members of the Righteous Alliance. In the evening, all the important politicians had left. Only the 9 members of the Righteous Alliance were still waiting for the latest information from Nightwing. Similar to Batman, Nightwing had strict requirements for himself. The second the appointed time arrived, he opened his communication channel. "I have to say that this place is really bad. During the day, there is no one on the streets. However, at night, everyone comes out of their houses like crazy. Smashing, robbing, committing all kinds of crimes. It's..." Nightwing's face was a little pale. He had been to many places that day, secretly observing and recording everything. This place made him uncomfortable, very uncomfortable. "Bruce, can you imagine? The Graysons here are really bad. They are both circus trapeze artists. However, their activities in the country are not to perform, but to launder money. Their leader, Richard Grayson, is a complete villain. He facilitates criminals all over the country by sending weapons, money, and selling all kinds of information. Nightwing said hatefully. Although that person was not him, he still felt that someone was using his name to do bad things. "What's Gotham like there?" asked Batman. There are many landmark buildings here. Arkham Manor, Tompkins Brothel, free food for the poor, the iceberg restaurant that has been destroyed by Nightingale. Nightwing said with an ugly expression. The members of the Righteous Alliance looked at Batman from the corner of their eyes. Unfortunately, they could not see any expression on his face. Jim Gordon is the mayor here, but he's a big embezzler. Nightwing shared the information he had gathered. The Atom Man also told him about the information he had found out. The father of the nation here was Benedict Arnold, a villain who betrayed Washington and the War of Independence for £6,000 in Thea time. The national flag was not a blue background with white stars, but a red background with black stars. The red and white stripes had also become blue and black. "Clark, I thought the super queen here was Diana. I didn't expect it to be Louise." The Atom Man said awkwardly. "The Lantern here is also Hal Jordan, but according to the records, he is a coward." Amidst a bunch of annoying bad news, the Atom Man found a piece of news that he didn't know whether it was good or bad. Eating empty pay, drinking the blood of soldiers, concealing reports, making false reports, passing off shoddy goods as good ones, and reselling military supplies. Everything that one could think of could be found here, and it was very common. If it was the Earth's army, they would be able to wipe them out without any losses. The call ended quickly. After all, Super Boss rested during the day and came out at night. It would be bad if he was heard. After the call ended, the heroes looked at each other. If there were no Kryptonians in that world, it might at most be a more evil planet. This made Superman reflect on whether it was right or wrong for his parents to send him to Earth in the first place. Thea and the others didn't have time to feed him chicken soup. Ordinary heroes only cared about who they were dealing with. For example, the Flash and Green Arrow were discussing how to deal with Johnny Quick. Diana also expressed her dissatisfaction with the Super Queen's noose and dress. Strategic issues could only be discussed by Thea and Batman. "This blood-red sky is the barrier you mentioned, right?" "Yes." "The Anti-Watcher is about to enter this world, right?" "How much time do we have?" "Over there, it's 14 days and 2 hours. Here, it's 17 days, 9 hours, and 35 minutes. She was very sure that space barriers, and time were originally the strengths of magic gods. After studying the talents of the fifth-dimensional people for a few days, she had a deeper understanding of them. "Can you deal with the Anti-Watcher?" "Should be able to." Thea didn't say that Uncle Da should be able to defeat the Anti-Watcher. After all, the original Anti-Watcher had absorbed the power of 3 universes on Earth and was still able to fight to a draw with Uncle Da. Now that he couldn't absorb the power, how could he be stronger than the original? As for why Darkseid appeared on the battlefield, Thea would not explain. She would just treat him as a passerby. When the time came, no one would be interested in watching the fight. "I don't seem to understand what you mean. I thought you were going to lead a team to destroy evil, but now it seems that there's more to it. An even more evil person wants to destroy these bad guys, and you want to save them. Is that what you mean? Why don't you let them kill each other?" There was another person in the room who didn't belong to the Righteous Alliance. She knew the true identities of all the superheroes. She was invited to the Righteous Alliance's small meeting so that she could report to the politicians after the meeting. The politicians were not young anymore, and they couldn't stay up late. Cynthia was too lazy to brag about herself, so she gave the opportunity to Batman. "It's like this. We're not going to save the bad guys. We're going to save our universe from danger. If we don't do anything, then evil will indeed be eliminated, and the entire universe will be blown into dust." But then, an even more terrifying person will come to Earth, to our Earth. This is not to save the bad guys, but to save ourselves. Avatar didn't agree or disagree. With her experience, it was hard for her to imagine that an individual could swallow an entire universe. How powerful would that individual be? However, she believed in Batman and Thea's judgment. She nodded to show that she understood. Even with a conservative estimate, Luthor would only take 7 to 8 days to build the door on the other side. The Righteous Alliance, including the Alliance, had already reached the final stage of preparation. After leaving the Hall of Justice, Thea and Diana teleported to Paradise Island. The recent battles had been thrilling for Thea. Black Death King, Raoul, First Lantern, one after another. However, for Diana, she couldn't defeat the strong ones, and she crushed the weak ones. She felt that her martial arts skills were deteriorating. Now that the war was imminent, she wanted to return to the land where she was born and raised to regain the feeling of battle. Chapter 962. Listening to the howling sea breeze, the bright moonlight shining in the forest, and watching Diana practice martial arts methodically, Milady was initially prepared to watch from the side, which made the Valkyrie unhappy. She could only playfully pick up a sword and fight with her. Thea had not practiced martial arts properly in the past few years. She was a very pragmatic person. If it was useful, she would practice it, and if it was useless, she would give up. She would not say that these martial arts skills were taught by old Ma. She did not have the time to practice them because she missed her youth. She did not care, and she was a little absent-minded. Naturally, there were many flaws in the fight. If not for her fast speed and good foundation, she would have been defeated long ago. Diana practiced for a while and was also a little disappointed. She also knew that the use of martial arts would be less and less in the future, but she could not let it go. She had practiced for thousands of years, and suddenly found that the martial arts that she was proud of before could no longer be used. The confusion of the important things leaving her made her heart feel a little heavy. Why do I feel that you have more things on your mind than I do? Thea handed her a bottle of water. She suddenly realized that she had been too concerned about the two-dimensional world recently, and neglected the people around her. If you were given a chance to choose again, would you choose eternal immortality, or to live an ordinary life like an ordinary person? The two hugged their knees and sat back to back on the beach. After a long time, Diana said slowly. After saying that, she smiled and answered her own question. You will definitely walk this path. No matter how difficult it is, you will definitely do it. This was the trouble of the long-lived species. As a medical giant, Thea felt that she had discovered a new illness. In layman's terms, it was that they were tired of living. The accumulation of hundreds and thousands of years of memories put a heavy burden on the soul, giving them the illusion that they did not fit in with the world. Before Lady Styx met Thea, she had not developed her superpower for thousands of years. Attikitis soaked in the blood pool every day, and used such violent means to prove that he was still alive. Not to mention the little blue guardians. The more knowledge they had, the more childish their thinking became. Now, they had degenerated to the level of kindergarten. However, they were all troubled by the fact that their lifespans were too long. Compared to them, Diana was fundamentally different. Thea didn't say anything. She just needed to be a good listener. Diana didn't need to be weak in front of others. It was enough for her to have a shoulder to lean on and listen to her thoughts. Humans age too quickly. Batman is much older than when I first met him. He is no longer young. Although his body is still strong, I can see that he is tired. Barry purposely kept himself moving at a low speed, suppressing his speech speed and reflex speed to prove that he is still a normal person. However, there are wrinkles at the corner of his eyes. How long can he keep running at a high speed? 10 years or 20 years? Will he disappear into the universe one day while running? Clark is old in my eyes. Maybe Kryptonians live longer than Earthlings, but I guess he will leave eventually. The Sea King's lifespan is slightly longer than that of Earthlings, but it's only a little more than 100 years. What should we do when our companions grow old one by one? Do we save their lives or let them go to the end of their lives? Diana said word by word. It was obvious that she had thought about many of these words for a long time. Now that she said them out loud, she seemed to be in a better mood. Thea thought to herself. Diana had been in contact with the people on Paradise Island for a long time. She had never had the concept of life, old age, illness, and death. She had closed herself off from human society for 100 years and was wary of everyone. It wasn't until she met Thea again that she opened her heart and walked out in front of others again. She had made some friends. When it came to life, old age, illness, and death, no one in the world except the Black Death Emperor had a better right to speak than the goddess of death. However, there was no need to spoil the mood and talk about realms at this time. In many myths, the gods liked to make friends at first, but in the end, without exception, they closed themselves off and no longer cared about the mortals. Life forms were different. When the mortals died, they died, but the gods had to bear this friendship for 1,000 years, 10,000 years, or even longer. Over time, there was a gap between the two. Diana looked mature, but her mental age was really young. Thea found it a little funny that she was still worried about these things. At this time, persuasion was not very useful. Everything depended on one's own thinking and finding one's own position. Moreover, she was wrong. Batman could still live for a very long time. He was a little old now because the dark multiverse was not fully online. Once it was fully online, Batman's life would reach an infinite level. Whether Batman was old or not, Catwoman had the most right to say. There was no need for the two outsiders to worry about it. As for Barry, Superman, and the others, they all had their own fates. They were not as pessimistic as Diana had described. It was just that it was too troublesome to explain. The young lady's solution was to change the topic. Do you know the mystery of the birth of the universe? Diana knew her well. She whispered, changing the topic again. No, do you know? Actually, I don't know either. But I know that we are all invaders. Her words were shocking. Diana was indeed attracted. Her lover knew a lot of secrets. In her opinion, it was caused by the difference in levels. It had to be said that the Valkyrie's interest was piqued. She immediately threw the matter of Batman to the back of her mind. Why do you say that? In the beginning, the universe was dark. There was no life. You've seen the Black Death Emperor. Although it's not accurate, he could be said to be a native of this universe. We, you, me, all the people and gods you know, are actually invaders. The subversive words made Diana face it seriously. The two of them no longer sat back to back. Instead, they sat side by side. The Valkyrie tilted her head and waited for her to continue. She could not do the fifth-dimensional people's ability to change reality at will. However, after studying it for so many days, a simple diagram was not difficult for her. Without using magic, divine power, or any other power, she could change reality with the help of a part of the rules. Of course, the prerequisite for moving 1,000 pounds was that she had to have the strength of a few hundred pounds. Otherwise, it would be nonsense. She skillfully made a planar diagram. The universe was in a state of chaos. It seemed real and fake at the same time. As for whether it was real, she had not seen it with her own eyes. She could only imagine. Diana's realm was not high enough. She could not see the mystery behind the diagram. She thought that she was going to make a demonstration on the spot. Thea did not boast. The world was dark at first. Then, a beam of light came from outside the world. It suppressed the darkness and brought light and life. As she spoke, she simulated a beam of light attacking the chaotic universe. The darkness resisted tenaciously, but in the end, the light broke through the layers of barriers. When the beam of light came into contact with reality, life was born.